including the other 4 elders, as well as the 3 admirals who are affiliated with the world government, naval headquarters. Most of them, most likely also possess Conqueror's Haki. It's just that they are not as unscrupulous as pirates. Due to the owner of the Void Throne, their conquerors are never easily revealed. After all, Conqueror's Haki, the so-called King's qualifications, is considered a kind of blasphemy against the king of this world. But so what about high-end conquerors? It's still a little bit behind mine. Yulo's lips curled up into a sneer. The next moment, vast power suddenly swept across the entire venue. Yulo stood there, his clothes rustling, and the dark air flowed towards the white-robed old man's bright red Conqueror's Haki. The black airflow was overwhelming, spreading forward densely, and Marineford's light was blocked and became dark. On the battlefield not far away, the pirates destroyed the enemy and were attracted by the movement here. This is Yulo Kadri's Conqueror's Haki, and that old man also has Conquerors. The pressure is so heavy, I can't even breathe. All the pirates were shocked, and this thrilling Haki made most of the crew feel uncomfortable. You can't bear it anymore, get out now. The leader, an old captain, shouted under pressure. Boom. The 2 Conquerors' Haki touched. The black Haki was as motionless as a mountain, and the fierce red Haki's momentum was immediately blocked. Crackling. Where Haki was entangled, red and black lightning flashed. Under the pressure of the 2 energies, the ground cracked and collapsed, and a ravine appeared, dividing Crescent Square into 2 halves. The clouds in the sky also separated from it, and the clouds on both sides rolled upward, like a canyon in the sky. One sword-style shadow continuous slash. The white-robed old man let out a low roar. The blade of the sword was covered in armament color, and turned into an afterimage and rushed towards Yulo. He kept waving the long knife, slashing one after another, and fired towards Yulo. At the same time, Yulo was not willing to lag behind, and stood up like a jet of lightning. Thousand Slice Valley. Reikari flashed with black lightning, covering armament Haki, and waved it in Yulo's hand. A large amount of sword energy enveloped the lightning, and clashed with the shadow chain slash. Boom. 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 Continuous explosions resounded throughout Marineford, and the scattered slashes turned into tiny sword energy. The ground, the walls, and wherever they passed were covered with sword marks. The sword energy lingered on the marks and could not be dissipated for a long time. Whoosh. Whoosh. The sound of breaking wind passed by, and the blades of Yulo and the old man in white robe clashed violently over the ravine. Clang. The 2 swords collided, the sky and the earth were pale, and the airflow swept across and spread in all directions. Haha, old guy, you are pretty strong. Yulo looked at the old man in white robes in front of him and couldn't help but joked. On the contrary, the white-robed old man's gaze was like a torch, with killing intent and sword intent intertwined. Snort, with a low growl, he was bound to thwart Yulo. The famous sword of the white-robed old man buzzed, and the sword energy on his body surged instantly, with a large amount of sword energy brewing in the blade. In an instant, a suppressed situation was formed. Faced with countless sword energy, Reikari couldn't help but tremble slightly. Yulo's electric sword energy was being wiped out bit by the white-robed old man's sword energy. Asking for trouble, Yulo sneered. The old guy in front of him was really hard-working. The old man's sword energy and conquerors are not as good as Yulo's, and now he wants to suppress him with his sword energy. Such a close-up burst of sword energy will hurt yourself if you are not careful. But since he did this, let's play with the old man. Let this old guy know that even if you don't use Qinglian's inner fire, you can't beat him with swordsmanship. As Yulo thought, the electric light suddenly blazed, and under the urging of the sword energy continued to pour in. The 2 of them stayed in the air, not holding back at all, and their sword energy continued to be output. Gradually, the lingering sword energy continued to accumulate and flew around the 2 people. At first glance, it was astonishingly spectacular. At this time, a burst of energy was generated between the 2 swords, forcefully forcing Yulo back, and the old man in white robe took 2 steps. Groan. The sound of the sword roar was loud and went straight into people's hearts. The eardrums of Yulo and the old man in white robes couldn't help but sting. This energy turned into sword energy Uzumaki, spinning between the 2 swords, and in the blink of an eye it was more than 10 meters in size. The extremely sharp sword energy spread towards Marineford, and the people fighting in the distance felt the sharp aura coming towards them. Such a sharp sword energy is extremely dangerous. The long-bearded old man who fought with Newgate was very afraid of this sword energy. When he saw the white-robed old man in the center of Uzumaki, he couldn't help but worry about him. Gu la la la, look at him, he can't take down Yulo. Newgate used his fists and Kong Yunki together. Seeing that the old man in white robe was so desperate and still couldn't do anything to Yulo, his words were full of joy. He glanced at Yulo secretly, but there was an unconcealable shock in his eyes. Dear me, Yulo is really good at fighting, and I, Shiki, can't do any worse. As a great swordsman, Shiki is extremely sensitive to sword energy. Just the spread of sword energy makes his heart throb. However, this also aroused his competitive spirit, and he worked harder and became more courageous in the battle. This Yulo, I really underestimated him. The old man with blonde hair and glasses couldn't help but feel worried even though he was fighting against rocks and was suppressed the whole time. They are getting old after all, and as the fighting continues until now, they feel that their physical strength has dropped significantly. Although I can still try my best to support it, I can't hold on for long. They originally expected the old man in white robes to escape quickly to support them, but they didn't expect that Yulo's strength exceeded their expectations. Two old guys, how dare you get distracted? Rock's eyes were cold, and the sword energy suddenly attacked. The two old men recovered and quickly joined forces to resist. At this moment, Uzumaki's sword energy reached its limit and rushed away from Yulo and the white-robed old man. Boom. Boom. Uzumaki spun rapidly and turned into two huge sword energy, slashing towards the sky and the earth. The space seemed to be frozen, with only these two sword energies standing between heaven and earth. Click. Click. The sword energy slashed into the ravine, and the land with a radius of hundreds of meters exploded and collapsed. Boom. The deafening loud noise stirred up a large area of dust, and the crescent square of naval headquarters completely collapsed and ceased to exist. Together with Crescent Bay, it crashed into the sea. At this time, on the battleship at sea, the correspondent was holding a phone bug, his mouth open and dumbfounded. Hey, talk, what's going on now? Kong's anxious voice came through the phone. No more. Nothing, please speak clearly. After a while, the correspondent came back to his senses. The naval headquarters square and Crescent Bay all collapsed into the sea. What? Kong was furious and wanted to come back immediately. This is Marine's headquarters, it's gone forever. Didn't we talk about a surprise attack on the naval headquarters? How could it turn into the destruction of the naval headquarters? Crescent Bay and the plaza were sunk, but Kong would not have felt that the office building was intact. All the information and files were gone, as well as the headquarters munitions warehouse, which must have been plundered. All of this, Marine's years of accumulation, were destroyed in one day. Kong clenched his fist tightly, his joints cracking, and as a marshal, he felt his heart bleeding. Perhaps the Marines' combat power has not been lost, but the infrastructure and operating conditions have returned to before liberation. Sengoku, Garp, Zephyr, Crane, are angry, full of sense of justice, and feel aggrieved. Rock's pirate, you're too arrogant. Zephyr suddenly became furious and said through gritted teeth. At this time, he still believed in justice. In his heart, naval headquarters was a place full of justice and should not be desecrated. Rock's pirate's behavior broke his bottom line of justice. Marine has suffered 2 defeats, and plans to use this full-scale attack to test the Rock's pirate and promote Marine's reputation. Unexpectedly, Rock's was so cunning, and used a trick to divert the tiger away from the mountain, which made Marine confused. Then they took the opportunity to surprise Marineford and destroyed Marine's base camp. Even if Rock's can be eliminated this time, naval headquarters will suffer heavy losses and will have difficulty operating in a short period of time. This is simply unreasonable. This time we must avenge our disgrace and take down Rock's and the others. Garp suppressed his indignation and said firmly, with great determination. On the contrary, the 3 admirals felt equally angry, but mixed with a little selfishness. Damn Rock's, I'm going to retire soon, and all the money I need to support my retirement will be given to you. The 3 of them were calm on the surface, but inside they were filled with grief and anger, and they cursed hard, Rock's. But what the 3 of them didn't know was that all the money they had treasured for many years went into Yulo's pocket. Sengoku, Crane, remained silent. Given the current situation, the 2 of them really didn't know what else to say. The large fleet was on its way at full speed, hoping that the headquarters could drag them back. How is the fighting situation at the scene? Kong controlled his emotions and immediately asked anxiously. As soon as the words fell, everyone trembled and woke up in a hurry. Compared with the loss of naval headquarters, the situation of this battle is the key. The 5 elders took action personally, and the 2 adults faced off against Golden Lion Shaki and Whitebeard Newgate. Rox is alone and besieged by 2 adults. The 2 adults are currently barely able to resist. The last adult, unable to help Yulo, faced off with him. The large-scale collapse just now was caused by Master Lao Xing and Yulo's uncontrolled sword energy. The correspondent's tone revealed shock, and his voice was trembling. What? Everyone present was shocked and their faces were full of disbelief. Have the leaders of Rox Pirate grown to this point? Marine allocated a large amount of resources to secretly train Sengoku and the 3 of them. It was not until this full-scale expedition that the 3 of them reached Admiral combat power. If it were Yulo, they would be able to accept it, but Shaki and Newgate actually have such fighting power. How did they practice and how did each of them make such rapid progress? Kong turned to look at the 3 admirals with a questioning look in his eyes. 3. Admiral regretted it, his eyes flickered slightly, and he shook his head silently. Damn it, 5 elders can't last long in this situation. Kong cursed in a low voice, his face as gloomy as water, and everyone frowned, thinking about countermeasures. At the moment, Yulo, Shaki, Newgate, and the 3 old men were evenly matched. However, the 2 old men who were fighting against Rox had begun to retreat, and it was only a matter of time before they were defeated. The current forward speed has reached the limit of a warship. Still, it will take half a day to get back to naval headquarters. Zephyr spoke in a deep voice, stating the problem at hand. Everyone was silent and thinking. At this rate, by the time they get back, the day lilies will be cold. At this time, Sengoku thought, Rox flew there, why couldn't they? Marshal Kong, we have a solution. Sengoku raised his head suddenly and said loudly. Say it. Kong understands Sengoku's wisdom very well. It's very simple. Please ask the Flying Dragon Admiral to fly over with the vanguard. Sengoku looked at Admiral Quincy and nodded slightly. As soon as these words came out, everyone suddenly realized, and Kong nodded repeatedly. Immediately, Quincy transformed into a beast, turning into a wind god pterosaur, carrying Kong, Herman, and Alot, and roared away. Sengoku, Garp, Zephyr, Crane, the remaining marine fleet, after learning this lesson, cannot let the fleet have problems again. New World, near Beehive Island. The Roger pirates have been wandering here, always paying attention to the movement. Originally observing from a distance, the informant in Marine revealed that Rox led a group of people to surprise Naval Headquarters Marineford. Rox, Newgate and others, the most feared ones, are not on Beehive Island. As a result, Roger's pirate ship dared to penetrate deep into the enemy's hinterland. Captain Roger, Senior Rayleigh, Senior Jabba, are we going to attack Beehive Island? The young bullet, with muscular limbs and high-spirited eyes, asked eagerly. Although the Yulo he was looking forward to was not there, the silver axe on the island, John, was still extremely powerful. Bullet, who is naturally warlike, is not picky about food at this time and just wants to have a good fight. You kid, please be quiet. Whether you want to be beaten or not is another matter. Jabba glared at Bullet and gestured angrily. Rayleigh on the side said nothing, looking at Roger standing on the bow of the boat. After a while, Roger put away the phone, turned around and walked back to the 3 of them. No need to fight, let's go back. After Roger finished speaking, Bullet jumped so high. The 5 elders personally stalled for time, while Garp and the others stayed behind to guard the large fleet. Kong and the 3 admirals rushed back to Marineford at full speed. Roger explained it to Rayleigh, Jabba, and Bullet, including some details. It's too late for them to rush back. Bullet was a little frustrated and immediately grasped the key point. It looked like he still wanted to fight. Bullet, have you forgotten that Admiral Quincy's ability is that of an ancient wind god pterosaur? Rayleigh said in a playful tone. Bullet became more decadent. Quincy's speed means he can get back in time. Even if his energy is exhausted, there are still 3 of them, Kong, Herman, and Ilot. We should be able to turn around and suppress Rox and the others, but it's still unknown how we can win them. Jabba held his chin and expressed his opinion. Even if the fleet rushes back, it's not necessarily possible to win. Rox is hidden too deeply. No one knows his true strength. Rayleigh sighed dejectedly, still not optimistic about Marine. Bullet seemed silent, his thoughts already far away. Ha 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 ha, these are not important, there are only 2 results. World government and Marine paid a huge price to capture Rox and the others. Of course everyone is happy. They tried their best this time and still couldn't win Rox. It's time to reflect. Our intention to cooperate may be reconsidered. Roger grinned and laughed. All worries were swept away, and he felt extremely happy. No matter what the final result is, they will definitely make a profit. Rayleigh and Jabba were stunned. They couldn't help but look at each other and nodded in unison. Roger is right. If 5 elders and all marines, such an unprecedented lineup, still can't beat Rox. I'm afraid we really have to unite them and destroy Rox together. As early as the news that Yulo injured Admiral came out, Roger expressed his intention to cooperate with Marine, but Kong decisively refused. Let's withdraw from this sea area. Since we won't attack Beehive Island, let's go attack somewhere else. Occupying the outer islands of Rox Pirate, it's time to expand our territory. Roger held his waist with both hands, threw his head back, laughed, and shouted boldly. The next moment, an excited roar covered Roger's voice. Ha 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 ha, I can finally fight. Bullet was so excited that he changed his silent attitude. At this time, the naval headquarters, Marineford, is in ruins. Rock's battle with the blonde old man and the old man with glasses became more and more comfortable. After resisting for a long time, the physical strength of the 2 old men was approaching its limit. At a disadvantage, Rox could no longer resist all attacks, and wounds began to appear on his body. 2 old guys, let's see how long you can last. Rox continued to output, a sneer appeared on his face. The 2 old men were about to run out of gas and energy. If they hadn't tried to hide their strength, they would have been killed by the sword right now. Quote. The old man with blonde hair and glasses gritted his teeth and remained silent, desperately resisting the attack. Clatter. 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 There was a continuous sound of footsteps, the 2 couldn't stop retreating, and wisps of blood dripped from the air. The other 3 old men saw that their companions were in increasingly dangerous situations, but they could only feel helpless and angry. Yulo, Shaki, and Newgate were entangled, and the 3 of them were unable to escape and were helpless. The blonde old man and the old man with glasses became slower on defense, so in their eyes, Rock's knife became faster and faster. Just when the blade was about to fall, a warship suddenly appeared on the sea level in the distance. Boom. There was a burst of wind, and a white trajectory took off from the battleship, shooting toward the shore. In an instant, the white trail blocked Rock's knife and pushed the 2 old men out. This is a middle-aged man, wearing a white suit and white robe. Facing Rox, his plain face could not help but look solemn. Bang. The armed fists collided with the sharp blade, and the strong force reverberated back. The man in white retreated and came to the side of the old man with blonde hair and glasses. The 2 of them were closing their eyes and regulating their breath. Rox continued to attack, and their physical strength was unsustainable. Taking advantage of this opportunity, 6 Styles' life returns, quickly regenerating physical strength. Otherwise, the man in white alone would not be able to hold Rox. Oh. Admiral Combat Power, CP0 people. Such a big CP0, you are the only admiral, why don't you come with a few more? Rox sneered, disapproving, and his overlord courage was clearly evident. 3 admiral-level combat might be a bit tricky, but the strength of those 2 old men has declined and is not as good as it was at its peak. If they really want to fight, Rox's strength is still worthy of the 3 of them. Haha, Rox, what a shameless statement. Look at the 3 of us, we must take you down. The blonde old man and the old man with glasses had almost recovered their physical strength and stood up with a sneer. The man in white was juxtaposed with the 2, and 3 powerful auras were entangled together. Watch out, the 3 of them had blazing eyes and roared in anger as they attacked Rox at the same time. Huh, here we come, that's good. The 3 old men in the battle felt relieved. With the addition of the man in white, I can't say that I can win Rox, but at least I can compete. There is no need to be beaten back and forth like before, without the ability to fight back, or even in danger of one's life. On the contrary, Yulo, Shaki, and Newgate reacted completely differently. The strongest shield is CP0, and it indeed has admiral combat power. Yulo and the old man in white robe were separated by the blade at the touch of each other, then they glanced at each other and raised their brows. I have seen a lot of admiral combat power, but this is the first time I have seen one with CP0, but to be called the strongest, he must have a lot of strength. Just like those rumors, the CP0 organization is extremely hidden. It is only confirmed that it has admiral combat power, but does not know the specific situation. Immediately, Yulo concentrated on fighting. The situation at Rox had nothing to do with him. The 3 admirals only have combat power, and they can't do anything to Rox. At least according to Yulo's observation, Rox has not been used during the battle, with his weapons deployed and conquerors entangled. Unfathomable strength, you can imagine how powerful it is, so far in the sea, except for the one among the flowers. Perhaps, only rocks can fight against 3 admiral-level warriors alone. Shaki and Nugate, after being surprised, quickly jumped into the battle. The sailing warship finally arrived at Crescent Bay. A group of strange, inhuman soldiers stepped on the ruins and killed the pirates in the distance. These soldiers have various mechanical weapons on their limbs. They are humanoid weapons from the Ministry of Science. They carry out mechanical transformations on the human body to improve the combat capabilities of individual soldiers. As expected, the capabilities of humanoid weapons are somewhat unexpected. The pirates started a battle with them and were caught off guard. Except for the capable captain, the crew members were all slightly injured. I'll tell you, are they humans or ghosts? These mechanical weapons are really troublesome. They are both fire-breathing and electric. Facing an unfamiliar opponent, although they were not defeated, they could barely resist. When the captain saw this, they couldn't help but curse. The physical fitness of these soldiers is at the level of ordinary crew members, and some are even worse. However, the addition of mechanical weapons made up for the lack of physical strength, and suppressed the pirate crew in terms of individual combat capabilities. This wave of operations perfectly explained how technology changes strength. When Yulo saw this scene, he felt emotional. Linlin and Kaido, who were watching the battle, naturally noticed it. Linlin saw their attacks, the flames, thunder and lightning looked very similar to hers, and frowned in extreme displeasure. A majestic slash of the sword struck out, killing everyone. Kaido, who was covering his wound, followed with a mace. They were brutally tortured by the old man in white robes and could only watch the battle silently. They had already been filled with anger. If I can't beat the Admiral's combat power, why can't I beat you, a bunch of strange minions? Kaido endured the pain of the wound, and his burly body rushed forward, knocking away a humanoid weapon. What's going on? It's quite hard. Kaido felt a slight numbness on his arm and couldn't help but feel confused. However, he didn't expect that much and continued to vent his grievances. Linlin's flames and thunder kept rushing towards the humanoid weapons, but they were all blocked, which made her angry. Wei Guo. Taking advantage of the gap between attacks, Linlin launched another slash, intending to take a breath. But who knew, 2 shadows suddenly appeared among the group of humanoid weapons. A clang. The 2 figures jointly resisted, and the slash hit the mechanical arm, causing the 2 of them to retreat continuously, leaving deep footprints on the ground. How can it be? Linlin was slightly surprised. The auras of these 2 people were not strong and they could not be stopped. Their robotic arm seems to be sea stone. Kaido leaned over, thought for a while, and said in a deep voice. So that's it, it's sea stone. Linlin looked at the 2 people in the distance with a confused expression. He saw that the robotic arm was indeed different from other soldiers, and there was no trace on the surface. No wonder he dared to take her blow head-on. He thought he was so strong because of the hardness of the sea stone. It can be seen from the footprints on the ground that the 2 men are not feeling well either. Linlin, I'm not a capable person, let me deal with them. Kaido's thoughts were rough and subtle, and considering that Linlin was a person with abilities, he took the initiative to come forward. That's it, I'll clean up the soldiers and you deal with them. Linlin did not refuse, he accepted decisively and turned around to change the battlefield. She is demon fruit power, sea stone is specially designed to restrain her, and she will be unable to turn around when touched. Although Linlin's strength is much stronger than those 2 humanoid weapons, in battle, as long as she encounters sea stone, no matter how powerful she is, she will be at the mercy of others. She is so young and beautiful and has not given birth to enough children yet, so it is safer to be on the safe side. Linlin controlled the flames and thunder, and the sword energy on his long sword was shooting out. Together with the pirates, he killed everyone. Thunder ate trigrams. When the 2 men saw Linlin walking away, they immediately wanted to catch up, but were stopped by Kaido. The 3 of them had no choice but to fight, with Kaido's mace pressing down on them and beating them. The only advantage the 2 have, the sea stone robotic arm, is completely useless. The old man in white robe noticed this scene during the battle, and his face turned red with anger. With the arrival of this wave of humanoid weapons, we finally gained some advantages, but they were broken again in the blink of an eye. Hey, old guy, what are you thinking about? Watch out. Yulo muttered deliberately, and the tip of Reikiri's knife suddenly raised. The sword energy emitting electric light struck the opponent's throat. The white-robed old man's observation haki was always aware of Yulo's attack. He leaned back and avoided the electric sword energy. The old man used the inertia of his body to do a few backflips and distanced himself from Yulo. Hiss. Who? Hiss. Who? After using all his strength, the old man in white robe was panting and his physical strength was obviously reduced. On the other hand, Yulo's face didn't turn red, his heart didn't beat, and he seemed to be fine. The old man used all his moves, but Yulo blocked them all with ease. The old man's physical strength is really low, and time is running out. Yulo looked at the old man panting, knowing that he didn't have much energy left, and thought to himself. It's been a long time since the attack on naval headquarters and then the battle until now, and one of the CP0 Admiral forces has rushed over. Kong, San Admiral and others should also be rushing back. Yulo will not fight endlessly, otherwise he will fall into the trap of the world government. Old man, stop pretending, give it back with your life, and regain some of your strength. After a while, the confrontation was interrupted, and the aura on Yulo's body began to change. The old man in white robe had an ugly face, the muscles at the corners of his mouth twitched violently, and he was grinding his teeth in frustration. He was indeed secretly recovering his strength, but Yulo exposed it to his face, leaving him speechless. He fought with his life in this battle and never missed any opportunity. Hey, then take another move from me. Yulo didn't care about the old man's reaction, his momentum changed at this moment. In the sharp sword intention, Conqueror's power rose and condensed into the sword intention. It did not explode in a large area, but concentrated a little. The two wills were united into one, and there was a strong sense of crisis. Yulo spoke for no reason, and there was no need to play tricks on him. This should be his special move, but it turned out to be a monster. The old man in white robe was frightened and subconsciously became nervous. Boom. Yulo activated the razor, and the air was blasted, turning into a flash of black lightning, stabbing at the old man in white robe. Whoosh. Yulo appeared in the sky above the white-robed old man. The Reikiri, covered in armed colors and dancing with electric light, slashed at the old man. The electric sword energy tore through the air, causing the old man in white robes to feel pain on his face. While he was always vigilant, he was still filled with doubts. Although this sword energy was strong, it did not scare him. Could it be that Yulo was really bluffing? As his thoughts were flowing, the old man in white robes stepped forward, his hockey and swordsmanship reaching the ultimate level. In the air currents raged, and white sword energy and black electric sword energy came closer and closer. Hee. At this moment, a sneer sounded, and the corner of Yulo's mouth twitched. The sword intent was extremely concentrated, Conqueror's hockey moved, and two black airflows followed Yulo's hands and flowed to Reikiri, wrapping the blade around it. In an instant, Reikiri's aura surged, and black lightning crackled. The concentration of Conqueror's hockey made the sharp sword even more sharp, adding another layer of pressure as heavy as a mountain. Suddenly, Reikiri's blade was filled with power like a mountain in the old man's sight. This is Conqueror's entangled. The white-robed old man was shocked, and let out a horrified roar. The domineering and fierce attacks were getting bigger and bigger in his pupils. Damn it. Try your best, ah. The attack was so close that he couldn't care less, the old man roared ferociously. The arrow was on the string and had to be fired. Even if he didn't resist, he couldn't dodge it. Boom. The two knives intertwined and collided in the air. The air exploded and the airflow rolled back, wreaking havoc between the heaven and the earth. A black ball of air appeared between the two swords, flashing with black arcs. The moment they collided, the old man felt the pressure of a mountain. Conqueror's hockey, with a little concentration, cannot withstand any powerful defense. Boom. The old man was hit by a mountain-like force, and his body fell toward the ground. Even the consciousness in his mind was in a trance for a moment. What's going on with this Yulo? It turned out to be Conqueror's entanglement. The terrifying Conqueror's fluctuations passed fleetingly, and the four old men glanced at it and saw an incredible scene. They and the rock side were there, and this was the first one to wrap up with Conquerors. They don't use Conquerors easily, so although the 5-person Conquerors have advanced strength, they have not mastered advanced usage skills. As far as they know, only 3 people, including Rocks, can use Conqueror's entanglement. Even Shiki and Newgate have a high probability of not mastering it yet, but the current Yulo is not only able to retract and release freely, but also has great power. Conqueror's entangling blow directly hit the white-robed old man, and he fell like a kite with a broken string. The blood spurted out in the air, leaving a red trail. Meanwhile, Shiki, Newgate, and Rocks also took notice. Gu la la la. What a Yulo boy, what a conqueror's entanglement. Whitebeard Newgate was startled, now really shocked. He has also mastered Conqueror's winding for a short time, and he knows that it is not easy to master it. Newgate practiced for more than a year and finally mastered it in one fell swoop, but Yulo mastered it without saying a word. He has been at sea for so many years, and his natural talent and physique are outstanding, but compared with monsters, he is really not good enough. Gia ha ha ha, as expected of Yulo, it really surprises me. Golden Lion Shiki separated from the old man in the suit and laughed very unexpectedly, feeling happy for Yulo. Deep down, I felt anxious and my mood was a little complicated. His strength was improving, and Yulo was also improving. Unexpectedly, Yulo would take a step ahead of him and master Conqueror's entanglement. Unknowingly, Yulo's strength has been ahead of him since the last battle. Ha 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 ha. On another battlefield, Rox was in a cheerful mood, and his laughter echoed endlessly. He used emission hockey, which made him more powerful. With his sword skills and hockey's coordination, his fighting power became more and more fierce. Even with the addition of CP0 Admiral, Rox still had the upper hand against the three admirals, 1 against 3. The man in white and the two old men could only cooperate to resist and look for opportunities to launch a counterattack. Just when the old man in white robe was about to fall to the ground, Yulo took action again. Groan. Reikari seemed to feel Yulo's will and couldn't help but tremble and make a sword roar. Reikari, let's see if we can take him away with one sword. Yulo stroked the blade gently and murmured to himself, the sword's intent boiling. The boundless sword energy condensed, and a bone-chilling cold light shone on the pitch-black sharp blade. Qinglong yin flowing water. A soft drink sounded indifferently, reaching everyone's ears. Yulo stepped lightly on the air, and his figure became blurred, as if he melted into the air. In an instant, Yulo disappeared, and within everyone's sight, a long blue sword energy dragon was entrenched in the air with an imposing manner. Yin. The blue sword energy was long, and as the breath escaped, the surrounding air trembled, like a sword roaring or a dragon roaring. The huge dragon of sword energy stirred up the air and rushed straight towards the white-robed old man. Damn pirate, stop it. Under everyone's attention, Yulo's sword moves rose again, and before his power surpassed him, even a fool knew what he wanted to do. The blonde old man's face changed drastically, and he let out an angry roar, his eyes about to burst. Seeing that his old friend was in a life-and-death crisis, the blonde old man was heartbroken and wanted to rush over immediately. How could Rox let him succeed? He flashed in front of him and unleashed an emission hockey. Bang! With one blow, he blocked the blonde old man and made him step back. A paralyzed dog and two old guys are not allowed to go anywhere. Your opponent is me. Rox sneered, and the top conqueror's hockey locked the three of them and crushed them. How could he let the blonde old man save the old man in white robe? Rox wished that all the 5 elders would die. What's more, under his offensive, the blonde old man had no time to care for himself and still had time to care for others. It seems that I don't feel the despair deeply enough. Do you think this is the only strength I have? Snort. Rox snorted coldly, released Conqueror's hockey, and charged at the 3 people with a fierce momentum. This is top-notch. Conqueror's hockey. The blonde old man and the old man with glasses released high-level Conquerors and resisted Rox's powerful and suffocating Conqueror's hockey. The man in the suit did not awaken Conquerors and had to stand slightly back. We can't worry about so much and focus on holding Rox back. Trust him. Rox rushed towards him, and the calm old man with glasses scolded him. Like the blonde old man, he also wanted to save the old man in white robe, but the situation did not allow it and there was nothing they could do. And Rox seems to be getting stronger again, which makes him feel great pressure. The blonde old man looked unwilling, but he could only nod his head, and the 3 of them started fighting with Rox. The old man with a long beard and the old man in a suit were also entangled by Shiki and Newgate, unable to escape. All this happened in a short moment. The sword energy dragon and the old man in white robe were very close. In another breath, the old man in white robe will be swallowed up, and even if he cannot die, he will be seriously injured. When the sword energy dragon rushed towards him, the white-robed old man's mind had already recovered. But the impact of Yulo's blow was really strong, and the force on his body hadn't been completely discharged. He wanted to dodge but couldn't move now. The long sword energy dragon reflected in the white-robed old man's pupils became bigger and bigger. Ah! Damn it, move it quickly, move it. The fallen old man in white robe was covered in a biting chill, and his hairs were dripping with cold sweat. But he was unwilling to give up. His face was so ferocious that it was almost deformed, and he kept roaring in his heart, mobilizing the remaining strength in his body to break away from the mountain-like impact. Yan. Roar. The deafening sword chant and dragon roar, the sharp sword energy rushed towards his face, and the old man's white robe was covered with sword marks. Give me. Move. The dragon of sword energy arrived in an instant. Under the threat of life and death, the old man in white robe fought for his life and roared ferociously to the sky. His teeth were covered with blood and flew out. At the last moment, there was a click, as if the shackles were broken, and the control of the body returned to his hands, and he suddenly felt like he was reborn. He mobilized his last strength, stepped on moonwalk, and rushed upward with all his strength, barely dodging the sword energy dragon. Ha ha ha. Dodge, I dodge. The old man in white robe was in a miserable state, his physical strength had been exhausted, and he was grinning hoarsely, with a bit of madness. To this age, he has never experienced anything like this before. His heart palpitations are as if Shinigami has arrived, and he is still terrified at this moment. The other 4 old men were always paying attention to their old friend, and they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when they saw that their old friend was safe and sound. But, that's it. Yan. Roar. The sword chant and dragon roar resounded through the sky again, accompanied by Yulo's voice. That's it. These 4 simple words are like a magic sound that enters the ears and captivates the mind. The sword energy dragon moved, its movement trajectory changed, the huge dragon head was raised, the dragon body turned over, and the airflow was raging. The old man in white robe was exhausted and had no power to resist. He felt the fierceness behind him and didn't even have time to turn around. In an instant, when he turned around, he swallowed the white-robed old man. The huge dragon body passed by, and the sharp sword energy slashed past him. Peefed. Marineford was silent, except for the sound of blood splattering. The sword energy dragon completely passed through, and the white-robed old man's body slowly dissipated, and Yulo's figure was revealed. He stood in the air with a calm face and indifferent eyes. He moved his right hand and Reikiri turned around and flicked it to his side. The blood stained by Reikiri's blade slowly dripped down the tip. The old man in white robe behind Yulo had a horrified look on his ferocious face, and his eyes seemed frozen in disbelief in his big eyes. As the blood dripped from Reikiri's blade, the old man in white robe also fell hard. With a bang, it hit the ground. Boom. The impact of falling from a high altitude caused a deep pit to form on the ground, with gravel and dust flying everywhere. The already dilapidated Marineford has a large number of cracks spreading again, and there is a faint tendency of collapse. The shocked pirates and the remaining humanoid soldiers seemed to feel the ground shaking, and then they all came back to their senses. Do you feel it? The ground is shaking violently. This is not worth mentioning. The important thing is that Yulo Kadri actually severely damaged the 5 elders. Master Yulo's long sword energy finally raised its head. It's incredible. The captains and crew members were so shocked that they completely forgot about it. They were holding weapons in their hands. They looked at each other and talked about it. On the contrary, there were not many soldiers left in the science department. Seeing the defeat of the 5 elders, they immediately lost their fighting spirit. Some soldiers even trembled with fear. The power of the long sword dragon made them intimidated. As this, Yulo's strength, Linlin and Kaido were stunned, this scene lingering in their minds. Charlotte Linlin was fine, she was just in shock, but Kaido was different, feeling extremely bitter and powerless. He and Linlin worked together to receive a blow from the old man in white robe, which was very difficult, but Yulo alone easily defeated the old man in white robe. And Kaido knows that this is not Yulo's full strength. Yulo has no power from beginning to end. The 4 old men never expected that this would happen. The old man in white robe had already dodged, but who knew that the long sword dragon suddenly raised its head and turned around. Ah, you deserve to die. Seeing the old man seriously injured and lying on the ground, the grumpy blonde old man burst into rage and went berserk. What kind of monster is this Yulo? The old man with glasses was equally angry, but much calmer than the blonde old man. However, his face was red with anger, and he looked like he was not feeling well. The other 2 old men looked ugly, felt extremely heavy, and even felt a hint of despair. Originally, I wanted to rely on the old man in white robe to quickly deal with the others and then support them. Unexpectedly, the old man in white robe was the first one to be seriously injured and fell to the ground. He didn't know whether he was alive or dead. Even though they tried their best to look Yulo in the eyes, Only then did they realize that they still underestimated Yulo. Except for Rox, who was 1 against 3, Yulo could defeat the old man in white robe before Shiki and Newgate, which is enough to show that Yulo's strength is stronger than Shiki and Newgate. Even if Shiki and Newgate can compete or even gain the upper hand against any of the 5 elders, defeating them is impossible. In Rox Pirate, Yulo's current strength is second only to Rox. Shiki, Newgate, who fought hard, almost had his eyes bulging out of his head, and felt that his heart could not bear it. The excitement brought by Conqueror's lingering shock had not subsided before another more exciting one came. Shiki, Newgate, glanced at Yulo with resentment in his eyes. He wanted to say something, but found that he couldn't. Yulo, this bastard, can't he keep a low profile? We are fighting, not watching your personal show, let us concentrate on fighting for a while. However, Yulo's strength spurred Shiki and Newgate to become more competitive. During the battle, Shiki and Newgate exerted all their strength, their fighting spirit reached a new high, and their fighting power became more and more courageous as they fought. The situation of the two sides who were originally evenly matched has changed. Shiki and Newgate have a slight tendency to have the upper hand. After the blonde old man started his rampage, he immediately gave up his defense and attacked Rox desperately. Even if he was injured, he didn't care. Seeing this, the man in a suit looked at the old man with glasses. The old man sighed and nodded solemnly. The old man with glasses knew that the blonde old man was going to fight, and the balance of the situation was already tilted towards the pirates. Even if they risk their lives, they have to wait until Marine returns to be worthy of the price. Rox, we fought hard. The 3 of them surrounded Rox and attacked wildly, their faces becoming hideous and terrifying. They were almost in a desperate situation. Before Marine came back, they could only struggle hard. It was worth risking their lives. Compared with the previous timid defense, the desperate attack was obviously more effective, and Rox's suppression was suddenly relieved a lot. Although there were injuries on the 3 of them, these minor injuries had little impact on the 3 of them due to the impact of the attack. Ha 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 ha, this looks cool. As the 3 men became determined to fight, Rox's fighting spirit also skyrocketed, and only then did he feel the pressure. Rox had an arrogant smile on his face. They had already booked the victory in this battle in advance. In front of Rox, even if the 3 of them risk their lives, the outcome will not change at all. The edge of the blade flashed, and the top Conqueror's haki exploded out instantly like thunder in the clear sky. With a ferocious smile on his face and a red light in his eyes, he bravely faced the attack of the 3 people. Rox made a fist with his left hand and hammered at the 3 of them. A domineering impact burst out. For this move, Rox used the weapon color to release, which is the so-called emission haki. Bang! The 3 people's joint attack was blocked by the invisible barrier. They were not surprised, but instead became even more crazy. Once the offensive stops, the 3 of them will be hurt, so they continue to attack. However, Rox used both hands and was 1 step ahead of them. The long knife wrapped around Conqueror's, the scarlet edge bloomed, and it struck fiercely. Directly interrupting the 3 people's offensive, the nearest blonde old man was actually chopped down. Rox Conqueror's entanglement was more ferocious than Yulo's. The impact of the top Conquerors hit the blonde old man to the ground and was deeply embedded in the earth. Sudden, overbearing, and extremely terrifying. Whether it's Conquerors or weapon colors, they are all top-notch. The bespectacled old man's eyes were horrified, and Rox's combat power exploded, instantly knocking the blonde old man away. The ground exploded and dust was scattered, and the blonde old man could not be seen clearly, but he was probably seriously injured. The old man with glasses and the man in a suit suddenly felt their pressure doubled. Rox will not stop his offensive just because the blonde old man is injured and absent. Sword energy slashing, emission haki, Conqueror's pressure, attacks come one after another. The old man with glasses and the man in a suit were defeated one after another while resisting with difficulty, and their bodies were already scarred. Rox, who was unhurried, raised his sword again, and Conqueror's haki entangled him, intending to injure another person. Not good. The defeated old man with glasses shrank suddenly, his face suddenly changed, and he was horrified. If this blow lands, he won't feel any better than the blonde old man. Seeing Conquerors entangled and falling with a long knife, the man in the suit was heartbroken and stood in front of the old man with glasses. 6 styles life burns. The man in the suit had a determined look in his eyes, and he let out a loud drink, and the breath in his body suddenly surged. A large amount of white gas appeared, wrapping the man in the suit, and faced the Conqueror's entanglement, and he rushed forward. The old man with glasses trembled. He raised his left hand slightly, trying to pull the man in the suit back, but finally took it back. 6 styles life burning is the forbidden technique among the 6 styles. It consumes the user's life and temporarily improves body functions to achieve a surge in strength. The more lives it burns, the stronger it becomes. Conversely, the less it burns, the weaker it becomes. The man in the suit burns his life. If he faces other enemies, he still has a chance of survival, but it is rocks. No matter how much life is burned or how little, the man in the suit will probably die. The bespectacled old man's eyes were complicated, and the matter could not be undone. He quickly retreated into the distance. Conqueror's Hockey's wrapped blade violently struck the man in the suit. If it were a high-level Conqueror's Hockey, maybe he could withstand it, but it was a top-level Conqueror's Hockey. Boom. The white mist on the man in the suit, after persisting for a few seconds, was finally overwhelmed and dissipated. Boom. Rock's long sword was slightly raised, and Conqueror's substantial impact knocked the man in the suit into the air. The next moment, he smiled ferociously, sword energy flowed from the blade, and he disappeared from the spot. Puff. A flash of sword light flashed, a subtle voice sounded, and the weak man in a suit had his head and body split into 2. Blah blah blah. There was a rain of blood falling from the sky, and the man in a suit fell to the ground, his head rolling far away before he stopped. Except for the sound of fighting, everyone was silent. Burn life and increase combat power. Yulo looked at the man in the suit and was quite interested in this move. However, his 6 forms are only at an advanced level, and he has not yet come into contact with this forbidden technique. Rocks, you damn. As soon as the blonde old man stood up, he witnessed this scene, his eyes filled with bloodshot eyes. Although the status of the man in the suit is not as good as that of his old friend the old man in white robes, he fights side by side with him and is willing to burn his life in order to protect the old man with glasses. What's more, as an admiral combat force, each one is precious even to the world government, and it is extremely difficult to cultivate. The death of an admiral's combat power is not only a matter of face, but also a huge loss of combat power. Rocks beheaded the man in the suit, and then looked directly at the old man with glasses. Rocks, you dare. The blonde old man stood staggeringly, and suddenly saw this scene, and roared with splitting eyes. Facing Rocks alone, the old man with glasses would never be able to withstand it. Immediately, the blonde old man endured the pain, jumped into the air and rushed over. At this time, a strong wind came, and the tip of the knife with flashing light stabbed from his side. The blonde old man had no time to dodge and punched out from behind. Clang. The armed fist collided with the tip of the knife, and the blonde old man took a few steps back. Ah, Yulo, if you dare to block me, you are looking for death. Yulo's sudden attack made the blonde old man lose his mind. If he couldn't get over, the old man with glasses would be in danger. He couldn't care about anything at this time. No matter how strong Yulo was, he would fight to the death. The blonde old man didn't say anything. He just kept his head down and hammered hard. He looked powerful, but in fact he was chaotic. Yulo glanced at Rocks and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Then he moved around and dealt with it with ease. Rock's terrifying strength is probably beyond the admiral level. With 1 against 3, one person was killed, and the blonde old man could feel that the offensive was obviously weakening. For such an obvious price, even if he wasn't severely injured, it wouldn't be much different. Shaki and Newgate were shocked. The battle continued until now, and finally one person died, Admiral. With 1 against 3, Rocks was able to suppress 3 people, which was already ridiculously strong. It suddenly breaks out, directly injuring one person, and then kills another person with great force. It is simply invincible. Is Rock's strength a bottomless pit? Then he looked at Yulo, who was fighting against the blonde old man. Yulo and Rocks had defeated their opponents, but Shaki and Newgate were not far behind. The old man with a long beard and the old man in a suit couldn't help but feel sad, and despair began to spread in their hearts. The two have been looking for opportunities to escape, but Shaki and Newgate are in a tight fight. In the end, not only was he unable to escape, but he lost focus and was caught by Shaki and Newgate. A close fight, Shaki and Newgate began to suppress. The bespectacled old man facing Rocks alone breathed a sigh of relief with determination in his eyes. He held the long knife tightly and faced it calmly. Old guy, it's your turn. Rocks pressed forward step by step, and the Scarlet Conqueror spread along his right hand towards the blade. The aura it exuded was like an ancient ferocious beast, and the red light in its eyes locked on the old man with glasses. The eyes of the old man with glasses were dull. He was already determined to die. He was alone and had no hope. Anyway, he is going to die, but before he dies, he must let Rox shed his skin. 6 styles. Just when the old man with glasses was about to burn his life away, Rox stopped and even his momentum dissipated. This speed? It's faster than expected. Rox's heart moved, his face returned to normal, he looked towards the end of the sea, raised his eyebrows and murmured. As the captain of the pirate group, Rox made a quick decision and turned back to the ground, ignoring the old man with glasses. Shiki, lower the ship, it's time to go. Lin, Kaido, take the crew and get on the ship quickly. Rox slashed out a flash of swordlight, destroyed the remaining humanoid weapons, and quickly issued the order. Gia ha ha ha, old guy, I will definitely kill you next time. Gu la la la, let's leave the victory or defeat to the next time. Shiki and Newgate fought back and forth, forced the opponent back, and then retreated to Rox. The oversized hull slowly fell. Lin and Kaido organized the pirates to quickly board the ship. Shiki and Newgate stood ready to prevent the old guy from suddenly attacking. The situation suddenly changed, and the blonde old man's mind suddenly became clearer. Seeing Rox, Newgate, and Shiki, they all retreated, but Yulo was still fighting with him. Come and help me quickly and capture Yulo. The blonde old man's heart moved, and he suppressed his anger and woke up the 3 old men. Then the chaotic offensive began to become more orderly, and they pestered Yulo desperately, as if they were afraid that Yulo would run away. The old man with a long beard and the old man in a suit couldn't help feeling relieved when they saw Shiki and Newgate retreating. The 2 of them were obviously aware of the situation, and even though their expressions were extremely ugly, they did not pursue them. The man in a suit from CP0 died in the battle, the old man in white robe was seriously injured and unconscious, and even the soldiers from the science department died cleanly. Now there are only 2 of them left, the old man with glasses and the old man with blonde hair. With Rox's strength, they can't stay even if Rox and his party want to leave, let alone dragging Marine back. The old man with glasses was dripping with cold sweat and was in a state of shock. It was as if he had walked away from the gate of hell, and he almost collapsed. It has to be said that Rox's murderous intention made him feel like he was dead. This time the 5 of us go into battle in person, are we going to face failure in the end? Rox has unfathomable strength. I am afraid that only that adult can defeat him head-on. There is also the new recruit Yulo, a humanoid monster who is second only to Rox in threat. If they can't be solved this time, there will be endless troubles in the future. A deep sense of powerlessness permeates the hearts of the 3 of them. Come and help me quickly and capture Yulo. At this moment, the old man's roar resounded in his ears, deafening and piercing his mind. Brush, brush, brush. The 3 old men were shocked and trembled all over before they all came to their senses. The panic on the faces of the 3 people flashed away. They had fallen into a daze just now. If it hadn't been for the blonde old man's timely roar, they would have missed the great opportunity. They looked at Yulo who was fighting, and then glanced at Rox. They found that Rox was indifferent and his face was terrifyingly calm. The old man with a long beard and the old man in a suit subconsciously looked at the old man with glasses, with a questioning look in their eyes. Rox acted calmly and turned a blind eye to the place, making the 2 of them very cautious. The old man with glasses hesitated for a moment, gritted his teeth and nodded, making a great determination. Yulo is indeed powerful, but if Rox doesn't intervene between the 4 of them, he doesn't believe Yulo can stop it. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Making a decisive decision, the 3 of them ran forward, their bodies turned into afterimages, and they rushed over from 3 directions. Captain Rox, are we really not going to help? Whitebeard Newgate looked solemn and his palms were sweating. Golden Lion Shiki's eyes widened with anger. If Rox hadn't spoken, he would have rushed forward. Shiki and Newgate are inevitably a little worried about Yulo. After all, there are 4 admiral fighters, while Rox only has 1. Don't worry. Yulo doesn't want to fight to the death. He wants to see his limits. Rox was thoughtful, with a smile on his face, and his eyes twinkled as he looked at Yulo. Shiki's mind turned, which was also in line with Yulo's arrogant and invincible character. Then the anger died down, and Newgate and Rox watched the battle quietly. The figures of the 3 old men drew a trajectory in the air, getting closer and closer to Yulo. Including the blonde old man, the 4 of them were located in the southeast, northwest, and formed a siege. Come on, ha ha ha. Yulo's sense of sight, knowledge, and color suddenly became excited when he noticed the approach of the 3 people, and he couldn't help but laugh wildly. Do you really think you are rocks? HMPH, Yulo, you are so arrogant, you should pay the price. Seeing the opportunity coming, the blond old man stepped back violently and shouted angrily with a gloomy face. Faced with the siege of the four of them, Yulo's arrogant reaction made the blond old man furious. But this was not the time to be impulsive. He couldn't take down Yulo on his own. Four people must take action at the same time to be absolutely sure that Rox can take down Yulo in one fell swoop before Rox can react. The three old men arrived in an instant, without stopping at all, and entered Yulo's intended range. Hee. Yulo's eyes shone brightly, and his fighting spirit rose enthusiastically. Facing the fighting power of the four admirals, Yulo's blood boiled. He was excited and fearless. He just wanted to see the combined strength of the four admirals. Although their combat power had dropped a lot, either due to injuries or reduced physical strength, they still should not be underestimated. It's just a good time to see your own limits, and there are rewards for checking in on missions. If you can defeat a few more people, the rewards will be even more impressive. Yulo, die. The four old men took action, roared in unison, and the four stood up. Boom. Four auras erupted and connected in a square shape, surrounding Yulo in the center. Boom. 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 The air exploded, and the air current swept wildly, forming the air current Uzumaki. The four old men took action boldly, with three hockey fist seals in a flash of cold sword light, and they attacked. Captain Rox, can Yulo withstand it? With the strength of the four admirals, it's still too late to take action. Such an astonishing scene made Shiki and Newgate unable to sit still. If it were one of them, he would have been seriously injured even if he was lucky enough to survive, and his end would not be better than that of the old man in white robe. Why are you two panicking? Look at Yulo's calmness and just watch the battle quietly. Rox raised the corners of his mouth and said with confidence, as if he was the one being besieged. Shiki and Newgate heard this and had no choice but to wait and watch obediently, but their bodies were always ready to rush over if Yulo was in danger. The captain and crew members on the ship also looked at it with shock on their faces, and at the same time, they were also looking forward to Yulo's surprise. Where does Yulo get his confidence? Kaido stood behind Linlin, his eyes full of horror and muttering to himself. Kaido definitely recognizes Yulo's pervert and power, and has been convinced of it. But faced with the attacks of the four old men, he could not convince himself that Yulo could resist them. Ha 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 ha, I've been waiting for now, Qinglian Earth Heartfire. Open it. As Yulo shouted wildly, his robes moved automatically without any wind, and the momentum he had accumulated for a long time soared into the sky. Qinglian's inner fire emerged out of thin air and transformed into Uzumaki, which rapidly expanded. The surrounding temperature rose sharply, and a heat wave swept across the sky. Under Yulo's powerful compression, Qinglian's earth core fire ultimate burned, and most of the four old men's full blows were directly offset. No, go back, go back. The bespectacled old man's face changed drastically. He had no time to make any decision and had to exit immediately. The other three people did the same, subconsciously avoiding his sharp edge, but something happened suddenly and it was too late. The surging green fire Uzumaki directly engulfed the four people, rapidly expanded dozens of meters, and enveloped them all. Hiss. Who? Hiss. Damn, we miscalculated. Blue flames, terrifying temperature. Marineford was silent, and the difficult voices of the four old men echoed in everyone's ears. Master Yulo, so strong. Big. All the attacks of the four old men were neutralized, and the people were also swallowed up. Even the temperature of the air has begun to heat up. Everyone on the pirate ship saw Yulo's strength and resisted four old men with one blow. And listening to the voices of the old men, it seemed that it was not easy to endure Yulo's cyan flames. All the crew members were shocked, with awe in their eyes. They all felt that Yulo was simply amazing. Shiki, who was originally worried about Newgate, was relieved of his previous worries. Gla la la la, I almost forgot. Yulo's fire ability is really terrifying. Whitebeard Newgate patted his head and laughed relaxedly for a while. Yulo has not used fire since the beginning of the war, and has been using swordsmanship and hockey. Newgate almost forgot that Yulo still had a trump card that he hadn't used yet. This trump card is naturally the Logia Devil Fruit, Qinglian's earth-centered fire ability, and its ultra-high temperature burning. Even he is afraid of it. Qinglian Earth Heartfire. So that's what it's called. It's quite appropriate. Golden Lion Shiki, with shining eyes, thought about it carefully and felt that this name was very good. Yulo's cyan flame ability left a deep impression on him. When Yulo was able to defeat him, the so-called Qinglian Earth Core Fire was one of the most powerful tools he relied on. No one in the entire Rox Pirate, including Rox, all cadres and crew members, would not admit the power of Qinglian's Earth Core Fire. Rox had a faint smile on his face, smiling and watching the battlefield in the distance. The mighty green fire Uzumaki rapidly rotated and expanded, swallowing the four old men. The moment they were submerged by the green fire, the severe burning pain made the four old men feel dizzy. As if enveloped by Shinigami's flames, driven by this palpitating mind, the four old men subconsciously exploded and activated armament haki with all their strength, covering their entire bodies tightly. This was able to withstand the burning, but the high temperature baked in the water in the body evaporated. The remaining physical strength of the four old men was exhausted, and they were in an uncomfortable state at this time. The green fire Uzumaki spread in all directions, passing over the four old men, forming a flame Uzumaki that continued to rotate, as if it was endless. Yulo and the four old men were surrounded in the center of Uzumaki, invisible to outsiders. The crew paid attention eagerly, and observation haki penetrated. But as soon as they got close, the hot breath rushed towards them, and the crew couldn't resist it, so they had to give up. Only Rox, Newgate, Shiki, Linlin and Kaido can sense the battle situation in the center of Uzumaki. Uzumaki passed by, four old men, their figures revealed and in a state of disarray. The clothes are ragged, the skin is slightly burnt, and even the old man with a long beard has his beard burned off. Cough, cough, cough. The four of them were still in shock, and they retreated directly to the edge of the flame Uzumaki and distanced themselves from Yulo. We were too careless and ignored an obvious point. The old man with glasses secretly regretted it. He wanted to retreat further, only to find that he had reached the end. This Yulo is really tricky. If it weren't for his physical weakness, I would have defeated him just now. The old man in a suit roared in a low voice, with veins popping out on his neck. His eyes were full of unwillingness, but deep down in his heart, he was also afraid. What would happen if they were like the white-robed old man, exhausted, unable to perform armament haki, and engulfed by Qinglian's inner fire? The blond old man and the long-bearded old man looked gloomy and said nothing, waiting for the bespectacled old man's decision. The four of them were so eager to attack that they ignored Yulo's useless, signature cyan fire ability. One last-ditch effort. In the flash of lightning, the bespectacled old man's thoughts were flowing and he forced himself to make a decision. This operation achieved nothing and suffered heavy losses. Rox wanted to leave, but they couldn't stop him. He didn't want to give up just like that. With Yulo alone in front of him, there was still hope for the four of them to join forces. The other three old men nodded solemnly and prepared for the worst. Boom. 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 Just when the four of them were preparing to finally give it a try, the light between heaven and earth suddenly became dark, accompanied by rolling thunder. The four people suddenly looked up and saw a clear sky. Dark clouds rolled in at some point, and blue thunder intertwined between the clouds. The sudden thundercloud was so powerful that everyone outside Uzumaki was stunned. Boom. Gila. Crackling. Like a bolt from the blue, the roar was deafening. A lightning beam fell from the sky, and the crackling sound of thunder penetrated the air. The crew members in the distance looked at this scene, magnificent haki, and their hearts were shaken. Ha 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 ha, it feels so good. Yulo stretched out his arms, looked up to the sky and laughed wildly. The lightning beam fell and sank into his body, feeling extremely comfortable. Breath of thunder. Open. Yulo shouted happily, his aura surged, his clothes swayed, and his power swept over the entire audience. Countless arcs of electricity burst out, piercing the green fire Uzumaki with the power they spread, and shot out. The pirates on the ship, Linlin and Kaido, looked at the earth-shattering scene and felt the power of the god of thunder descending to earth. Everyone's eyes were dull, their expressions were frozen, and everyone was dumbfounded. It's his grandma's fault. This kid Yulo actually has a trump card. After Golden Lion Shiki was shocked, he cursed and left the group chat. Gu la la la, are you still letting others live? Whitebeard Newgate was still laughing, but his laughter was not as lively. Rox is well informed and can't help but frown. He also knows a few secret techniques to improve combat power. I just don't know if this secret technique will have any side effects. Yulo is his trump card and he doesn't allow any mistakes. But now that it has been used, it is better to wait and see what happens, and then ask Yulo to find out the situation later. Being in the center of the green fire Uzumaki, The four old men felt deeply, and Yulo's momentum suddenly increased greatly. The terrifying pressure, like conqueror's hockey, instantly shocked the four people. Secret technique, it's a secret technique, how could he do it? The blond old man was shocked, his face was full of disbelief, and he screamed out in surprise. The old man with a long beard and the old man in a suit also had expressions of disbelief on their faces, as if they had seen a ghost. All the secrets in the sea have long been wiped out by the world government and disappeared for 100 years. The only place where the secret exists is deep in Marie Joy's, among the flowers of Pangu. Even they, the 5 elders, cannot directly practice the secret technique. The 6th forbidden technique, life burning, was passed down by that adult. Damn, let's go. The old man with glasses cursed, suppressing his fear and shock, and rushed directly towards Uzumaki. The other 3 old men saw what was happening and followed closely behind them, soaring into the sky as quickly as possible. Originally, the 4 of them didn't have much confidence, so they could only give it a try. Now that Yulo has used the secret technique, his momentum has increased so much, not to mention his strength. No matter how strong the ghost is, it is still best to take action. It is not too late to take revenge. The future is long. Haha. Want to run? Can you run away? Suddenly, an arrogant voice sounded. Thunder and lightning were intertwined all over Yulo's body. He looked at the 4 old men with indifferent eyes, trying to escape. Boom. Suddenly, the green fire Uzumaki became restless, and its power increased to a higher level. It began to shrink crazily, the central space quickly shrunk, and it once again swept towards the 4 old men. At one go, rush out. At this moment, there is nothing else to worry about. The bespectacled old man's face turned red, veins popped out, and with a roar, he rushed forward desperately. Ah, ah, ah. The other 3 old men made low roars and also pushed forward with all their strength. But how could Yulo let them escape? The 4 old men took off rapidly, surpassing Yulo in an instant, and rushed straight to the mouth of Uzumaki. It's too late, it's too late. There was a bright electric light in Yulo's eyes. Reikiri was placed across his chest, and his left hand gently stroked the blade. On Reikiri's blade, the electric light began to beat, and began to become violent and violent. Qinglian Earth Heartfire, seal up. Before he finished speaking, Qinghuo Uzumaki's mouth closed and opened instantly. The only gap was closed, and the green fire Uzumaki became a sealed flame space. The scorching hot breath could not be vented and filled the entire space directly, and the temperature was twice as high as before. All this happened in an instant, leaving people unable to react. When the green fire Uzumaki mouth closed, it was accompanied by thunder and thunder. Thunder breath, 7 forms, blue fire thunder god. Green fire burst out, thunder and lightning exploded, the 2 echoed and went berserk at the same time. Yulo's figure disappeared instantly, and only a blue dragon, intertwined with green fire and thunder, was seen across the sky. And the green fire Uzumaki also dissipated between heaven and earth in an instant. Yulo's blue fire thunder god move is much more powerful than the previous blue dragon roar. Rox, who was silent, finally spoke rarely, his words full of recognition for Yulo. Golden Lion Shiki and Whitebeard Newgate, when they heard Rox's words, their faces flashed with surprise, and they fell into rare silence. Rox can be said to be unfathomable. He has always watched and said nothing about any of Yulo's actions before. But now, he took the initiative to speak and said such words, which was undoubtedly an affirmation of this move and Yulo's strength. Shiki and Newgate, their eyes fixed on the battlefield, observation hockey is always paying attention. What Rox said was much more powerful, but for the 2 of them, it was much more. After all, the gap between Shiki and Newgate and Rox is not even in the same rank. They wanted to see how powerful Yulo's trick was. Facing the combat power of the 4 admirals, although they are not in peak condition, if they want to defend with all their strength, they cannot be underestimated. Boy Yulo, to what extent can he do it? The light of the blue dragon reflected in the eyes of the 2 people, shining extremely brightly. Roar. The cyan dragon hovered into the sky, green fire and thunder and lightning surged. It was dozens of meters long, but its speed was as fast as ultimate. Just like lightning flashing across the sky, a flash of light flashed across the sky. Everyone squinted their eyes and felt that the entire sky was filled with flashes of light. It was at this moment that the green-blue divine dragon swallowed 4 people, and its dozens of meters of dragon body passed by the 4 old men. Ah! A scream of pain echoed through the sky. Scandium. Immediately afterwards, the sound of the sword being sheathed came to an end. The dazzling light dissipated, and the pirates below slowly opened their eyes. The terrifying aura just now made what they saw and heard had no effect. It wasn't until they opened their eyes that the pirates were able to see clearly the outcome of the battlefield in the distance. This is too terrifying. Those 4 old men seem to be seriously injured. This move is so powerful. If it were us, we would definitely die. You idiot. Are you out of your mind? Master Yulo just throws a move and we all burp. There is no need for this move. Many pirates on the ship recovered from the shock and began to marvel and talk in various ways. Kaido stood at the bow of the boat with a stunned expression. His jaw was about to dislocate, and he still didn't know anything. Only the green fire and thunder and lightning intertwined, like a flash in the pan, the blue dragon, constantly replaying in his mind. Next to her, Charlotte Linlin looked extremely shocked. She said nothing, but deep down in her heart, there were turmoils everywhere. Because her eyes betrayed her, the sun-like rays were much more blazing than her desire to have a child. The crew members standing near Linlin noticed this gaze and consciously stepped away, while praying silently in their hearts. Of course, not for themselves, but for their excellent Lord Yulo. In the distant air, all the energy has dissipated, but the surrounding space is still filled with heat, and blue lightning arcs crackle from time to time. Yulo, who was high in the sky, and Reikari had already withdrawn their sheaths, and the airflow kept coming. Yulo's robes were fluttering, and he looked down at the 4 old men with a look of disdain. The 4 old men below were in terrible condition. They were all in a miserable state, with blood all over their bodies and no intact skin. Especially the chests of the 4 people all had horizontal scars, the flesh and blood were completely cut open, and the white bones were exposed. The 4 of them gasped for air, the throbbing deep in their souls still not dissipating. It felt as if the Shinigami was holding his throat, unable to break free for a long time. Gudong, puff. Suddenly, the blonde old man couldn't hold on and vomited out a large mouthful of blood. After suffering a blow from Conqueror's entanglement, he was already suffering from considerable injuries. Now to add insult to injury, the blonde old man's body reached its limit and could no longer bear it. The blonde old man was seriously injured and fainted, and he fell down. The other 3 old men saw this and endured severe pain, and hurriedly caught the blonde old man. The 3 of them were exhausted, blood was flowing out from the wounds on their chests, and a sense of exhaustion was welling up in their hearts. Unable to hold on, they landed directly and placed the unconscious blonde old man next to the old man in white robe. All the scenes that happened, the pirates on the ship, Linlin and Kaido, Shiki and Newgate, and Rocks, could see clearly with only their naked eyes. Hey, be good. What a green fire thunder god. The god comes down to earth and strikes 4 times, he is so strong that he can reach the sky. Golden Lion Shiki stretched his neck, with a look of horror on his face, not caring about his image at all. Shiki kept mumbling, never closing his mouth, and the newly lit cigar fell to the ground. This style of green fire thunder god can't even fully capture the color of what he sees and hears. It can be imagined that its speed is so fast that it is almost ultimate. And the power is equally powerful. If he tries to catch it forcefully, he will inevitably be seriously injured. If you are exhausted, you will definitely burp on the spot. Gu la la la. This boy Yulo deserves to be called a monster. Whitebeard Newgate held Kong Yunki tightly, and after being lost for a moment, he laughed heartily. The embarrassed appearance of the 4 old men suited Newgate's liking. At the same time, he was shocked and surprised by this move and Yulo's strength. When he sensed the power of the green fire thunder god, he was more surprised than expected. Looking forward to what kind of damage this blue fire thunder god move can cause to the 4 old men. Even these 4 old men have very little physical strength left and their strength is greatly reduced. But after all, it is Admiral's combat power. With 4 people working together, it shouldn't be difficult to resist it. Newgate has put his estimate at what he considers to be the most likely possibility. Unexpectedly, even so, he still underestimated Yulo's strength with this blue fire thunder god move. In an instant, the 4 old men were hit, and all of them were seriously injured. Judging from their condition, they still experienced all-out defense. Newgate had to admit that Yulo's strength had surpassed him by a lot. If he were to stand in Yulo's position, he would face 4 admirals who were exhausted and their strength was declining. Even if I try my best, I am afraid I can only contend. It is difficult to gain the upper hand, let alone defeat them in one fell swoop. Ha 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 ha. Rocks laughed heartily and wildly. Yulo's great strength and the 5 elders' miserable situation all made him happy. After slaying the celestial dragons and destroying the world government, Rox sees infinite hope. Suddenly, Rox's laughter stopped abruptly. He stared into the distance and raised his brows. The pace of progress was quite fast. It didn't take long, but the road was not close. It seems that guy from Quincy has sacrificed his dignity. Yulo, it's okay. Retreat now. Rox's eyes flashed and he shouted to Yulo in a deep voice. Kong and the three admirals have long entered his range of perception. The Aeolus pterosaur with admiral combat power has top-notch speed and will be able to arrive in a short while. Now facing Kong and others, I'm afraid they will be entangled, which will be detrimental to them. The pirates who came this time were all elites on the ship. For Rox, every death would be a loss. There are also 3 old men who are sober, and they are really fighting. They are all time bombs. Yulo, who was standing in the air, nodded slightly when he heard the words and responded, then fell down. Rox's decision was not unfounded. He must have sensed that Marine was about to rush back. After all, on the eve of the battle, Rox was the first to sense the situation. Shiki, Yulo, and Newgate did not sense the arrival of the 5 elders. At this time, the heroic Newgate, who was rough but subtle, noticed the situation and remained silent with a sullen face. Shiki, on the other hand, was so excited that he started yelling. What's the matter? Retreat immediately. Captain Rox, such a good opportunity to kill 5 old guys. Shiki's hands were holding Sakuraju and Kumu, and they were sharpening their swords. When they heard Rox's words, they suddenly froze. His face was full of black question marks, and his heart was full of doubts and a little unclear. We must retreat, but there is no need to be so hasty. You can definitely kill these 5 old men who have no resistance. It's not too late to retreat. Shiki, you idiot, do you even need to say this? It should be Marine, he'll be back soon. Newgate looked scornful and mocked Shiki unceremoniously. Before Rox spoke, Newgate noticed Rox's micro-expression. As long as you use your brain a little bit, you can make a rough guess. Even Yulo in the distance could quickly figure out that Shiki was still beside Rox, but he still couldn't figure out the situation. As one of the admiral forces, he is still a cadre in the regiment, but he does not have the brains of a cadre. Except for Golden Lion Shiki, there is no one else. Alright. Sure enough, after hearing Newgate's words, Shiki's murderous aura immediately stopped. Shiki is not stupid, but his brain is slow to react, and he still understands the priorities of things clearly. Before coming, the plan made by Yulo, Shiki, Newgate, and Rox was to surprise the naval headquarters and harvest a wave of enemies along the way. They had to retreat before Marine came back, so they only brought a few elites with them, not wanting to fight Marine at all. Even the appearance of 5 elders in person was beyond their expectations. But fortunately, with Yulo and Rox, the 5 aging admiral forces did not cause any big disturbance. World government is not simple. If the 5 elders die, someone will take over. I have to prepare for other things in the next period of time, so I don't have time to pay attention to them. Rox already had a plan in mind, so he turned around and got on the boat. Shiki and Newgate looked at each other, looking helpless. What Rox said was still very majestic. Yulo came over with a smile on his face and thoughts flowing in his heart. What Rox said made sense to him. 40 years later, the next generation of 5 elders will definitely be better than these 5 old men. In Yulo's perception of the great swordsman, he can subdue the demon sword ghost Tetsu, and his swordsmanship is definitely better than that of the old man in white robe. If the 5 elders die today, the world government will definitely be angry. After the new 5 elders take office, they will rush to establish their authority and may go to war. In Rox's words, it seems that he has a plan and it will take some time to prepare. Now it seems that the Battle of the Valley of Gods is coming soon. Shiki, Newgate, you go first, I'll finish it off. Yulo calmly came to the 2 of them and said with a faint smile. G-u la la la. Gia ha ha ha. Shiki and Newgate smiled at each other, patted Yulo on the shoulder, and then jumped onto the boat. Shiki activated the lion fruit ability, and the large pirate ship slowly lifted into the air, leaving Yulo alone on the ruins. Among the 5 elders, the old man in white robes and the old man with blonde hair fainted, leaving only the old man with glasses, the old man with long beard, and the old man in suit. They were not seriously injured and fell into coma, but they were not feeling well either. The 3 of them sat cross-legged on the ground, urging the life to return, trying to quickly stabilize the injury, but to their disbelief, they found that the wound could only stop the bleeding. Whenever the energy promotes wound healing, burning and numbness come, blocking the nourishment of energy. After a while, the injury was not stabilized and the physical strength was not restored. The three of them looked gloomy, staring at rocks, Shaki, and Newgate, and boarded the boat one after another, but they were helpless and felt very unwilling. Rock's refusal to kill instead aroused strong resentment and murderous intent in the hearts of the three of them. However, my physical strength was unsustainable, so I could only watch as Rocks and the others left, otherwise they would have rushed up long ago. Suddenly, Yulo's voice made the three of them look over. 5 old guys, doesn't this feel good? Yulo, who was on the ruins, had a sneer on his lips and spoke provocatively. Yulo, you guy. The three people's faces darkened, their eyelids twitched with anger, and they spoke through gritted teeth, feeling that no matter how much they scolded them, they would not be enough. At the same time, I couldn't help but wonder why Yulo didn't retreat. I won't talk nonsense to you anymore. Rock's pirate means what he says, and he will publicly behead the celestial dragons. But this location has changed. Before Yulo finished speaking, the green fire in his left hand spread and turned into a long whip that reached the sky. He rushed into the room of the pirate ship and dragged 2 celestial dragons down. Ah, ah. There was a cry of terror, and 2 celestial dragons fell down, kneeling on the ruins under Yulo's control. The celestial dragons realized they had landed safely and were about to humble themselves and beg for mercy when a roar suddenly came from them. Yulo, that's too much. Yulo's words and actions dispelled the doubts of the three of them. They were all smart people and knew immediately what Yulo was going to do. Peeved. Ahem. You deserve to die. The old man in the suit was so angry that he stood up suddenly and pointed at Yulo, but he opened his mouth and vomited blood. The wound that had stopped bleeding was pulled again and began to bleed. Endless unwillingness and resentment, the old man in the suit could only sit down and continue to urge the return of life and restore his injured strength. Lord 5 Elders. At the sudden sound, celestial dragons looked up, somewhat disbelieving. They were clearly in the hands of pirates, but they were able to see the 5 Elders. 5 Elders. Are you here to save us? We are going to be saved, we are going to be saved, ha 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 ha. Immediately afterwards, the 2 celestial dragons, as if grasping hope, begged for help incoherently, going crazy for a moment. They were running around like flies, completely unaware of the situation of the 5 elders at this time. The old man in a suit and long beard clenched his fists, his joints cracking, his body shaking with anger, and his teeth almost shattered. The leader, the old man with glasses, felt as if his voice was stuck in his throat, unable to come out. He closed his eyes with difficulty. The 3 of them were in such a state that they could not save the celestial dragons at all. They could only watch helplessly as the celestial dragons died tragically before their eyes. Originally the Rock's pirate, the surprise attack on the naval headquarters, would have overshadowed the public beheading of the celestial dragons. The failure of this operation is a major blow that will bring the celestial dragons crisis to an end. However, Yulo's actions caused 2 major events to overlap. The celestial dragons died in front of their eyes, and the 5 elders refused to save them. They were sent back to the Holy Land Marie Joys, and the psychological pressure of the 5 elders exploded. Yulo's move is heartbreaking. It's really annoying. Dogs should be more obedient. Yulo took out his ears, with a look of impatience on his face, pulled out the rakery and chopped it off. Phew. Phew. The barking of the 2 dogs, celestial dragons, came to an abrupt end. Yulo's ears suddenly became quiet. Boom, boom. Killed by 2 swords, the 2 headless corpses fell down and fell on the ruins of Naval Headquarters, Marineford. Scandium. Rakery sheathed the sword, and Yulo raised his eyebrows sharply. Huh? Marine. I rushed back, it's a little late. This eeless pterosaur is Admiral Quincy, he's quite capable. On the sea level in the distance, a huge black shadow is moving quickly and has entered Yulo's range of perception. Yulo releases observation haki and instantly senses the aura of the ferocious beasts. Each one has admiral combat power, which is only stronger than the 5 elders. There is a touch of strong pressure in it, exuding the aura of ancient ferocious beasts, but it is strong and weak, and is very unstable. It must be Admiral Quincy, who transformed into a wind god pterosaur. He rushed for a long time, and his physical strength was too much. Maintaining the beast state seemed reluctant at this moment. Yulo's expression calmed down and he glanced at the 5 elders, but there was no abnormal behavior. The 3 remaining old men were struggling to recover from their injuries and had no time to be distracted. They seemed not to notice that Marine was about to come back. Yulo didn't have time to linger. He was not confident enough to think that he could compete with Kong and the 3 admirals. Whoosh. Yulo's body became elemental and turned into a stream of cyan fire, shooting away from the ground into the sky. Seeing Yulo leave, the 5 elders breathed a sigh of relief and relaxed their tense nerves. At this time, their combat power was reduced to 10%, and Yulo never left. They were worried, fearing that Yulo would go on a killing spree. We suffered heavy losses in this operation. Rock's pirate is a serious threat to the world government. The bespectacled old man's voice was heavy and his expression was not much relaxed. As the leader of the 5 elders, he must maintain dignity at all times. Rock's strength is unfathomable, and Yulo is the next Rock's. The old man's glasses had gone somewhere, and he stared at the direction Yulo left, his eyes full of fear. The old man with a long beard and the old man in a suit frowned and had complicated thoughts. They couldn't help but sigh, feeling deeply defeated. The 5 elders have been in power for more than 30 years, and the Rock's pirate is the most powerful enemy they have ever encountered. And Rock's pirate has some special features. Most pirate groups have the idea of threatening the world government, but their strength is average, and it is easy to eliminate them. A very small number of pirate groups have great strength, but have no dangerous ideas. They just plunder on the sea and do not confront the world government head-on. In this way, there is no threat to the interests of the world government. It is just a symbolic conquest and will not kill them all. Only the Rock's pirate has won over nearly half of the powerful people in the sea, making it the strongest pirate group. Captain Rox is a member of the D clan, and his ideal in life is to kill the celestial dragons and overthrow the world government. Now that Rox is so strong, if there is another Rox, the 2 most powerful players combined will be able to compete with 6 admirals. Coupled with cadres such as Rox Pirate, Newgate, and Shiki, they will be at a disadvantage in terms of high-end combat power. While the 5 elders were worried, the Marines who came back from a distance were all furious. After Marine entered Yulo's perception range, Marine also naturally sensed Yulo as well. What made them angry was that only the auras of Yulo, Rox and others were left, and they could no longer sense them at all. Damn it, we're going at full speed, are we still a step too late? Herman's expression was unwilling, and an angry voice came out from between his teeth. He subconsciously punched the Fengshun pterosaur on the back. As soon as he recovered from his injuries, he was waiting for this battle to unleash a breath of evil energy. As a result, he ran back and forth without even seeing a single person. For a moment, he, who was already feeling aggrieved, couldn't help but let out a punch. Herman, you idiot! The huge body of the Fengshun pterosaur trembled, and Quincy hurriedly stabilized himself and cursed angrily. The punch from Admiral's combat power was not an itch. Quincy was struggling to hold on and received a punch for no reason. He still didn't want to go back. Roar. The Fengshun pterosaur roared, venting its dissatisfaction, but its speed did not slow down at all, and rushed towards the naval headquarters. It was so hard for me. Not only did I sacrifice my dignity, I was as tired as a dog. This operation has come to an end, and he must be compensated, and Herman's fellow must give him a good beating. But what Quincy didn't know was that all the treasures in their naval headquarters had been looted. Even his private wealth fell into Yulo's pocket. Judging from the situation, not to mention compensation and pension, he probably didn't even get his salary. Rox and the others are really cunning, and we were fooled around. Admiral Ilot, who behaved calmly, said through gritted teeth, exuding a cold aura. The Marine's full-scale attack was so exciting, and in the eyes of all the countries at sea, it was even more majestic and spectacular. But in the end, even if he was played by the pirates, even his hometown Marineford was turned upside down by the pirates. He has been a Marine for more than 50 years and a Marine Admiral for 30 years, and has never suffered such a humiliation. Naval Headquarters Marineford was destroyed, and even veterans who were approaching retirement felt their faces dim. 5 elders, CP0 Admiral, Field Marshal, 7 Admiral Combat Forces, but they didn't stop Yulo, Shiki, Newgate, and Rox. Yulo has grown up too fast, and Rox is even more unfathomable. I didn't expect to be able to fight 1 against 2. Marshal Kong stood facing the wind, his hands behind his back tightly clenched into fists. The communications soldier was knocked unconscious by the aftermath of the battle as soon as CP0 arrived. Kong didn't know what happened next. He couldn't understand why 7 Admiral warriors couldn't even hold him back. Kong and Rox have fought against each other several times. Rox has the upper hand, but it is not as terrifying. But what he didn't know was that Rox had been hiding his strength. At this time, their observation hockey sensed Yulo moving quickly. Looking far up in the sky, you can vaguely see a cyan trail. No, Yulo is trying to escape and he found us. Herman's eyes widened and he immediately exclaimed. He was the one who least expected Yulo to escape. The green fire sword wounds on his chest and abdomen made him almost unforgettable, and he always thought about avenging his shame. Yulo is very strong. Let Ilot chase him and see if he can keep him. Let's rush back first, find Lord Five Elders, and learn the specific situation of the battle. When things got to this point, Kong was thinking clearly and seemed very calm, not getting carried away by anger. Something must have happened while the communication soldier was unconscious, which made it impossible for the Five Elders and the others to even leave rocks behind. You must understand the specific battle situation with the Five Elders before you can make a decision. He is not a combatant, but a Marine Marshal, the Marshal who leads the entire army. Moreover, Quincy's physical strength was low and his combat power was greatly reduced. He and Herman were unable to fight in the air for a long time due to their abilities. Only Alot was left, relying on the ability of Logia Snowfruit to catch up with Yulo and fight with him in the air. Okay, I'll go after him. If he's alone, I'll give it my all. Hearing this, Ilo didn't have any objections. He nodded solemnly and responded in a solemn tone. If it were Yulo in the past, he would have looked down upon him a bit, but after this battle, Yulo was able to defeat the Five Elders, which proved his strength and had reached admiral combat power. And in his impression, Yulo's fruit ability, the terrifying cyan flame, just restrained his ability. If we really fight, I'm afraid this Yulo will be very difficult to deal with. After Ilot finished speaking, he rose into the sky, his body elementalized, and turned into a blizzard, roaring towards the distance. And Quincy, Kong and Herman, the Aeolian winged dragon, continued to rush towards naval headquarters. The marine fort at the end of their sight grew bigger and bigger in the eyes of the three of them. Quincy's flying speed was worthy of the name of the Aeolian pterosaur. After a while, the naval headquarters was in sight, but even this moment felt extremely long to Kong. This is naval headquarters. Kong and the other three looked at the ruins below, which was a little hard to accept, and their hearts contracted suddenly. The entire Marineford front island, where there is the naval headquarters, not to mention the ruins, the huge marine office building was all broken into pieces of debris, and it was a ruin as far as the eye could see. If they hadn't been convinced that they had definitely gone the wrong way, plus Marineford, where the residents of the back island lived, had not been damaged. The three of them really have to wonder whether this is naval headquarters Marineford. Rocks pirate, they are simply robbers, how abominable. Herman was trembling slightly, his eyes were filled with anger, and his eyebrows seemed to be on fire. The marine office building, Crescent Bay and Square are all symbols of naval headquarters. In the hearts of countless soldiers, it is considered their second home. He believed that any soldier would react like this when seeing the scene in front of him. As a marine marshal, Kong's pupils shrank sharply due to the ruins of naval headquarters. He tried his best to control his emotions and couldn't help but roar in a low voice. He has worked hard for decades, and naval headquarters has devoted half his life to it. Now, in one day, returning to before liberation, it has become devastated. It has suffered a great humiliation, the greatest humiliation in the hundreds of years since the naval headquarters was established as the world government. During Kong's reign, such disasters occurred. Although he could not control it, as Marine Marshal, this was his dereliction of duty and he could not escape the blame. Ho. Facing the devastated naval headquarters, even Quincy, who transformed into a wind god pterosaur, couldn't help but roar. There seemed to be a faint voice coming from their ears, making the Five Elders instantly alert. The three motionless old men looked around subconsciously. This scene happened to be caught by Herman's condescending gaze. Marshal Kong, this is Five Elders, Lord Five Elders. Herman was still wondering why the naval headquarters was so quiet. He suddenly noticed movement, immediately observed it carefully, and immediately exclaimed. Quick, Quincy, let's get down. Kong was shocked and followed Herman's line of sight, staring intently. As expected, it was indeed the Five Elders, but the situation did not look optimistic. There were only 3 weak breaths in Kong's perception, and among the 3 breaths, there were also 2 unfamiliar breaths mixed in. 5 elders or 5 adults. Why are the other 2 auras missing from the perception of sight, hearing and color? Before Kong could think too much, the Fengshun pterosaur swooped down and fell down in an instant. Among the 3 old men, the old man in a suit looked around and found nothing. Now, even if they were physically strong and could see, hear, and perceive colors, it would be difficult for them to detect Kong, Herman, and Quincy at high altitude. Wow. Suddenly, a strong wind roared from the sky and swept away the three decadent old men sitting cross-legged on the ground. Huh. What's going on? Where did the strong wind come from? The long-bearded old man trembled, and his relaxed body tensed up again. The aura of the Fengshun pterodactyl drove them back in vain. The old man with glasses closed his eyes, and his tone lost its decadence, but his voice remained calm. It's too late to rush back now and can't change any outcome. Kong and Herman fell quickly, the Aeolus pterosaur shrank, and Quincy released his beast transformation. Lord Five Elders, what exactly is this? Kong, along with Herman and Quincy, strode towards the Five Elders and asked, looking quite anxious. But before he finished speaking, when he came to the Five Elders, his voice suddenly got stuck. Hiss. What's going on? Kong, Herman, and Quincy all gasped when they saw this scene. The three old men had horrific wounds on their chests, while the two old men next to them were in even worse condition and were completely seriously injured and unconscious. In disbelief, the three Kongs looked around subconsciously. On the ground nearby, the body of CP0 Admiral came into view. At this time, the three people's bodies trembled and they looked at each other, shock filling their pupils. Counting the field marshals, of the 7 admirals, 2 were killed in the battle, 2 were seriously injured and fell into coma, and the remaining 3 were also seriously injured and had no strength to fight anymore. Could it be that Rox has a backup plan? Otherwise, how could Rox, Newgate, Shaki and Yulo have achieved this? The 3 of them temporarily suppressed their confusion and came to the 3 old men, trying to help them stabilize their injuries. The top priority is to rescue the 5 elders, 3 zone ability users. The Grandmaster also restores life and has some accomplishments in recovering injuries. No need to waste your efforts, this wound will not recover in a short time. The energy we used was enough to completely heal the wound, but the burning and numbness prevented the wound from absorbing energy. Before you want to recover the wound, you must eliminate the flames and lightning, otherwise it will be in vain. The 3 old men shook their heads and refused medical assistance. They knew the extent of their injuries very well. When Herman heard this, he felt that this situation seemed familiar. The flame, the burning, is it Yulo? He murmured in his mouth, lowered his head slightly in thought, and only then did he react when he saw his abdomen. Herman raised his head suddenly, with disbelief in his eyes, and blurted out the word Yulo. When Kong and Quincy heard this name, they immediately thought it was impossible. The injuries of the 3 old men were exactly the same. How could Yulo injure 3 admirals at the same time? However, the words of the 5 elders broke their understanding. Yes, it's Yulo. Compared with your burning sensation, we have more numbness, which comes from Yulo's lightning ability. It is also a secret technique that can improve combat power in a short period of time. The old man with glasses opened his eyes and glanced at Herman. His tone was calm and he was used to it. Yulo's swordsmanship is very powerful. This gentleman was seriously injured and fell into coma because of Yulo's gift. He has also mastered Conqueror's entanglement, and his overall strength is already stronger than Newgate's. I conservatively estimate that with Yulo's strength, he can fight against 2 admirals in their prime. The long-bearded old man had a heavy expression on his face, and pointed at the old man in white robe, his tone revealing solemnity. Then, the 3 old men explained in detail Yulo's moves and the battle process. And, it has been emphasized how threatening Yulo is. Kong, Herman, Quincy, the more they listened, the more frightened they became, feeling their own cognition being pressed to the ground and rubbed by Yulo. Yulo. Herman gritted his teeth. After being extremely shocked, endless regret filled his heart. Yulo only wounded him a few days ago, but now he has grown to the point where he can fight many admirals alone. His strength has improved so fast that it is simply astonishing. If he had known this, Herman should have pursued Yulo regardless of his injuries, no matter how high the price was. But now, Yulo has grown up and it's too late to say anything. Kong's face was extremely ugly, as dark as the bottom of a pot. He listened to the 5 elders and remained silent. As a marshal, Kong felt only a little more regret deep in his heart than Herman. It's just that he suppressed it severely and didn't show it. Admiral Herman was recalled to the New World after Yulo's rise. Herman faced Yulo for the first time, and Yulo's strength was already impressive. Kong was different. Yulo had already entered his sight as soon as he appeared on the sea. Although the 2 sides were hostile, to put it mildly, except for the later 3 admiral, Kong, Garp and others, they watched Yulo grow up. It may sound ironic, but it's true. Don't blame Marine's intelligence incompetence, but blame Yulo's talent, which is too shocking. As Marine Marshal, Kong's experience and knowledge are considered top-notch, but his enemy is Yulo, whose experience and knowledge are too much beyond him. Herman, beside Kong, a somewhat weak Quincy, continued to listen with a sullen face. The five elders' information about the battle situation showed no emotion other than disbelief. The most important thing, the most threatening thing, is that guy Rox. After the old man with glasses and the long beard finished talking about Yulo, the old man in a suit who had been silent for a long time suddenly spoke. But after starting, the three old men were silent and did not take up the conversation immediately. For a time, the atmosphere became depressing. Kong was shocked and immediately cheered up. This was his old rival. He had already thought that in the previous matches, Rox had hidden strength. After a few breaths, the old man with glasses and the old man with long beard remained silent, and the old man in suit sighed. Oh, let me tell you. Rox had the upper hand with 1 against 3, seriously injuring an adult. In the end, Admiral, who had CP0, used life burn and was killed instantly with a knife. The old man in a suit said, his eyes flashed with deep fear unconsciously. Hiss. Who? Hiss. Who? Kong's breathing became heavier and goosebumps appeared on his skin, but he was still unaware of it. But from start to finish, Rox was playing with ease, and that's not his true strength. As for how strong Rox is, I'm afraid only he knows. When the old man in suit said the last sentence, his voice trembled slightly. After he finished speaking, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. So it's just you three. Where's Alote? After a while, the old man with glasses suddenly asked. How could such a major rescue operation be missing an admiral? As soon as these words came out, Kong and the other three were completely stunned. Only then did they think of poor Ilo. Oops, Ilot, intercept and kill Yulo. Kong's pupils shrank sharply, and his face turned as white as a sheet of paper. This was really terrible. Hurry up and call the phone bug and ask Ilo to come back. The bespectacled old man's face darkened, and he immediately urged him urgently. Bulu bulu. Quincy on the side quickly took out his phone. The blue sound lasted for several minutes, but he was still not connected. No need to dial, it's too late. Seeing this result, the old man with glasses was helpless and could only close his eyes and pray silently. If Yulo alone is okay, Ilot has a chance to escape, but if the Rox pirate and other cadres ambush, he will have no choice but to ask for his own blessings. Damn pirates, Rox, Yulo. Kong's emotions were on the verge of collapse, his eyes were bloodshot, and his low, hoarse voice contained strong murderous intent. Since Yulo joined the Rox pirate, everything has been out of control. Marine is like a decoration, and it is like a joke when facing Rox and the others. This has almost become a knot in Kong's heart. Only by destroying the Rox pirate can he feel at ease. Only in this way can the situation on the sea get back on track. To this end, Kong can even sacrifice the dignity of Marine Marshal. In the open space of the ruins of naval headquarters, the 6 people fell into a long silence. In the high sky in the distance, a green stream of fire was flying rapidly, drawing out a long trajectory. At first glance, it looked like a meteor falling from the sky. Bulu bulu. The phone rang. Yulo slowed down and answered the call. Gia ha ha ha, Yulo, how are you doing with the finishing work? Shiki's hearty laughter came from the other end of the phone. There is nothing wrong with the plan I proposed. Yulo responded easily. The green fire wrapped the phone bug to prevent it from being blown to death by the strong wind. Glala lala, if it weren't for the lack of time, I would really like to see the reaction of the 5 elders. There was a sound of scolding, followed immediately by Newgate's hearty laughter. Yulo knew as soon as he heard that Newgate must have snatched the phone bug from Shiki's hand. I will be able to catch up with you in a little while, you first. Suddenly, he noticed that wherever he passed behind him, the remaining warmth of the green fire was wiped out by external forces. It turns out it's him. That's interesting. Yulo released observation haki and instantly sensed the situation. Where he passed behind, there was an icy cold air moving towards him quickly. This icy aura was the same as one of the incoming Marine Admiral. Yulo. What's wrong? Who is chasing you? Rox on the other side guessed the situation here and took over Shiki's phone bug. Yulo is the person he values the most. Even if he believes in Yulo's strength, he still can't help but ask. Snow Leopard Admiral Alote, he chased him alone. Captain Rox, I can handle it. Just stick to the plan. Wait for me for a while and I can rush back. After the words fell, Yulo hung up the phone and stopped talking nonsense. With the strength he has shown, there is still some trust. On the other side, the phone caller hung up. Rox didn't say anything. If it was just an admiral, Yulo could indeed handle it. In the distance behind him, a large snowstorm was raging, and Ilot roared forward. His whole body was completely elementalized, and with the high air current, he was getting closer and closer to Yulo. Where he passed, a cold blizzard passed by, the remaining temperature dissipated, and small drops of water condensed, turning into heavy rain. Suddenly, Ilo's eyes lit up. Yulo's speed actually slowed down, and he started to make phone calls. In a moment, the distance was infinitely closer, and Yulo also entered Ilo's attack range. Even if you find me, this is still a good opportunity. Ilot's eyes turned into a bone-chilling coldness. Whoosh! A blizzard was blowing, the wind was howling, and his speed soared. In an instant, the scope of the blizzard suddenly enveloped Yulo. The cold air of the blizzard swept across, and the small water droplets in the air quickly froze into hailstones, which were carried by the icy airflow and smashed towards Yulo. A wide range of cold air passed by, and the green fire after the elementalization was blown back and forth by the cold air, and the temperature it emitted also dropped. Nature's blizzard, a good ability. Yulo deliberately slowed down, feeling the fluctuation of the green fire and Ilo's ability, with an inexplicable smile on his lips. He has never seen frozen fruit, so he doesn't know its specific abilities, but the coldness of this blizzard is already pretty good. Strictly speaking, Yulo's green lotus earth heartfire has transcended the realm of fruit. The cold air emanating from the blizzard reduces a little of the temperature of the green fire. It is already very powerful to be able to do this. It's not just about Logia's ability, but also about Elodie's development of devil fruit. Call. Whoosh! Whoosh! The violent howling of the cold wind was mixed with the sound of a lot of breaking wind, and hail fell overwhelmingly. Ha 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 ha, good time. Suddenly, Yulo turned around, his speed suddenly increased, and the sluggish green fire boiled again. Fire punch. Green fire lingered in Yulo's right hand, and he shot it behind him. Fierce hot breath surged out, and the green lotus earth core fire spurted out. Suddenly, the cold air around him dissipated directly, and the coldness of the airflow melted away and became billowingly warm. Boom! The blue fire fist sea collided with a large number of hailstones, and the high and low temperatures entangled and offset each other. G. 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 The blending of ice, snow and flames produces large amounts of small water droplets, and water vapor rises high in the sky. One side is cyan, the other side is snow white, with clear lines dividing the sky into two completely different sides. The battle between the positive and the negative is a life and death battle, with ice and snow finally falling into the disadvantage, while the power of Qinglian's inner fire remains undiminished. After completely melting away the hail, it blasted straight towards the source of ice and snow energy not far away. Wherever the fire fist passed, all the flying snow in the sky melted, wrapped in blazing heat, and swept away fiercely and quickly. Ilo's whole body was transformed into elements, turning into a small blizzard to hide, constantly releasing cold air. Call. The air wave came in, suppressing the cold air, and then the hot air rushed in. Ilot released the cold air, and was melted by the heat wave like paper. Z. G. Ilo's heart sank. The elemental blizzard's body was being hit by the boundless heat wave and had a tendency to melt away. Not good. Ilo's expression changed, he couldn't help but cursed in his heart, and he swept upwards without hesitation. A small piece of flying snow suddenly arose, changed its trajectory, and reached the sky in an instant. The majestic green fire rushed away and disappeared into the sky. High in the sky, the diffuse water vapor slowly dissipated. Yulo's green fire ability is really extraordinary. It just restrains my ice and snow ability. And it seems that the restraint is beyond the norm. The elemental flying snow quickly gathered and turned into a figure. It was Admiral Ilot. His expression kept changing, sometimes ugly and sometimes tangled. Although I knew that Yulo's green fire had an extremely high temperature, I still couldn't help but feel my heart throbbing after actually feeling it. According to Snow Fruit's information, even if it was restrained by Mara fruit, it would not reach this level. For some reason, when Qing Huo came to him, his instinct told him that he was absolutely invincible. Even when he was about to resist, the flash of heart palpitations seemed to come from Snow Fruit. This was something that had never happened before. He had been practicing on a volcano for several years in order to weaken his shortcomings. Those were the most frightening days. Even if the volcanic magma was restrained, that was about it. What kind of ability is Yulo's cyan flame? Mara Mara fruit's flame definitely doesn't have this kind of temperature. The unknown high-temperature flame is really uncomfortable, and it will be difficult to handle this time. Logia snowfruit, I think the person coming is Marine, Snow Leopard Admiral Alote. Yulo had a smile on his lips, looked through the mist, and said with a slight smile. Marine's third admiral, this was the second admiral he met. Judging from Yulo's experience, he is better than Herman and looks relatively younger. Just like the three admirals 40 years later, Aokiji is slightly younger than Kizaru and Akainu. However, the strength seems to be a bit weak. The dignified Marine admiral is also doing tricks of sneak attacks. Then, before Alote could speak, Yulo's conversation changed, his tone was full of provocation, and the sarcasm in his words was obvious and easy to hear. In the hazy mist, Alote saw that Yulo recognized himself and was about to respond. However, Yulo didn't give him a chance to respond, and just mocked him. You. Hum. Ilo's old face darkened, and he opened his mouth to defend himself, but he seemed to have discovered the truth, and that was it. He had no choice but to swallow his words, snorted coldly, and stared at Yulo with a gloomy face. He did sneak attack, but Yulo also discovered it and fought back. In the first brief confrontation between the two, Alote was restrained by Yulo and was actually defeated. In order to eradicate this threat, I accept the idea of conducting a sneak attack, but I cannot bear to say that I am not strong enough. Damn you brat, you are indeed very strong, but you are too arrogant. Alote gritted his teeth, his eyes filled with murderous intent, and a chill came out of his body. If Yulo hadn't restrained him and prevented him from acting rashly, he would have rushed forward and dealt a blow. But having said that, Alote was still very vigilant. He could fight one of the 5 elders alone, and his combat power was no weaker than him. Arrogant. This is the fact. I have the strength. Yulo smiled contemptuously and said firmly, exuding an invincible aura. Starting from injuring Hellman, he had the strength to compete with Admiral, and now he can easily seriously injure 5 elders. Alote may be younger, but he is not much stronger than the 5 elders. Coupled with Qingwo's extreme restraint, it will only be easier to deal with him. Haha, you are so confident. If you are too arrogant, you will pay the price. Alote looked disdainful. While he was wary of Yulo, he could not lose his momentum. Snowflow slash. The next moment, the snowstorm started, and Alote stretched out his hands and overlapped them horizontally in front of his chest. To prevent protracted changes, Rock's pirate came to support Yulo, and he chose to take action decisively. Call. The wind and snow were raging in the sky, and the cold snow swirled all over the sky, gathering in the palms of both hands. The icy snow continued to compress, exuding a cold air, and the temperature of the breath was several times stronger than before. You arrogant brat, if you have the guts, you can accept my move. A ferocious sneer sounded. Alote drew out his hands, the compressed ice and snow bloomed, and a blade of ice and snow that was more than 10 meters long suddenly burst out. The ice and snow blade was so fierce that it caused the airflow to churn. It looked like a snow blade, but it contained a strong cold energy, which was no less than ice. Click. 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 All the impurities in the high-altitude airflow were frozen into ice cubes, and the biting cold air raged, crushing Yulo crazily. Yulo, who was not far away, looked at his expression. The cold air that hit his face was overwhelming, and it invaded the inside of his body along the pores of his skin. He felt the bone-chilling chill, which made him quite surprised. There is something special about being able to become a Marine Admiral. This level of cold is no weaker than freezing. Alote in front of him may have already awakened to the development of snowfruit. If it were other Admiral combat abilities, Alote would be really difficult to deal with, but it was Yulo who restrained him. Yulo's thoughts moved, and the fire in Qinglian's heart began to circulate. The boiling green fire came out of his body, and the cold air in his body dissipated completely. What a snow-slashing trick. Yulo looked disdainful, and the green fire that suppressed the cold air could use any move to defeat the strong with the weak. Dance of the Flame Dragon. Yulo's figure stood still, and the surging green fire rose into the sky, instantly dispelling the cold around him, and the heat waves surged across all directions. The green fire spun straight up and rushed out for more than 10 meters before stopping and turning into a green fire dragon. Roar. The green fire dragon was lifelike, and its body flipped several times, causing heat to shoot out. It roared loudly, and the cold air in the surrounding area fled away. Amidst the deafening roar, a large wave of hot breath rolled in, and all the cold air that hit Yulo was completely melted away. Even the extremely powerful Snow Slash, which was more than 10 meters long, was shaken away by the roar of the green fire dragon. Seeing this, Ilot, who was holding some expectations, couldn't help but sink to the bottom of his heart, and his face became even more gloomy. The terrifying cyan flame, the restraint effect is too strong. Ilot lowered his head and his eyes began to flicker. If he continued to fight like this, he would be really frustrated. Marine Admiral's observation haki is no weaker than Yulo's haki, and it's not just a decoration. Yulo in his 2 attacks used almost the same amount of energy, but they were severely restrained by Qing Huo. Just a wave of rolling heat reduced the cold air that was fierce and killing Shui Lu. Sure enough, what he expected was true, this was the situation. After the green fire dragon roared, its huge body circled and swooped down in one go. The huge dragon head looked ferocious, opened the mouth of the brazier, and rushed towards the oncoming snow stream. Roar. A thunderous roar sounded, and the fangs of the blue fire dragon bit the snowblade. G. 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 The green fire collided and entangled with the ice and snow, and a large amount of water vapor lingered upwards. As they cancelled each other out, the fire dragon and the snowblade were consumed rapidly, and their shapes became smaller and smaller. Finally, bang! Under the high-temperature erosion, the snowblade exploded first, and the cyan fire dragon broke through the snowflow, leaving the 7-meter-long dragon body with unabated momentum. Ilo had already been mentally prepared, but this scene still frightened him. 6 Styles Tempest Kick. Armament haki activated, his right calf was pitch black and hard, he performed a spinning flying kick and a white slash. Whoosh. The white slash was as powerful as breaking a bamboo, directly cutting the green fire dragon into 2. In Ilot, not far in front of him, the powerlessness slowly dissipated. The next moment, the airflow vibrated violently, and an afterimage passed by at high speed, carrying the biting cold air, and headed straight for Yulo. Logia's abilities are usually external moves. In order to reduce Yulo's restraint effect on him, Ilot chose melee combat. In this case, the flame's ability is extremely limited. 6 Styles Finger Pistol. In an instant, Ilo's figure appeared in front of Yulo. The dark right index finger, wrapped in white mist, condensed with unparalleled power, pointed at Yulo's chest as fast as lightning. Armament haki superimposes 6 types of physical skills, is not afraid of Qinglian's inner fire, and breaks through the body protecting flame with a sharp thrust of energy. The next moment, Yulo was stabbed, and Ilo couldn't help but be overjoyed. The person involved, Yulo, was calm, and his expression remained unchanged. Clang. When the fingertips were still 3 fingers wide from Yulo's chest, there was a buzzing sound. Ilo's right index finger was blocked by force and could not move any further. Despite the armed color and powerful burst of energy, Yulo's body remained motionless. Do you want to show off your armed colors? Snort, come again. Ilo's face condensed, and he was secretly surprised. Then, he made a prompt decision, stretched out his left index finger, and moved cleanly. At the same time, the right index finger continued to explode. If one blow doesn't work, try another. However, it is not that easy. Ilot, who is too cautious, only thinks about the green fire and ignores other aspects of Yulo. At this moment, a strong gust of wind came, and Yulo's right index finger came out at some point, and with lightning speed, it met Ilo's left index finger. So fast, so strong. Ilot's pupils shrank sharply, his eyes stared outward, and his face turned pale with shock. Only then did he realize that although the close combat was in his favor and he launched the offensive first, there were also flaws. Boom. The tips of the 2 index fingers touched, and there was an explosion. The white energy impacted together, causing the air to explode. The energy fluctuations raged, the airflow surged and spread, and all the clouds within a radius of several thousand meters were scattered. Clatter. 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 There was a sound of rapid footsteps, and Ilot stepped backwards, using moonwalk to step on the air, causing explosions of airflow with every step. Ahem, cough, advanced 6 moves. Ilo stabilized his body, blood surged in his chest, coughed and looked at Yulo, his eyes full of shock. It's not that he didn't know that Yulo knew the 6-style taijutsu, but Yulo's advanced use of the 6 styles made him find it incredible. His own attainments in the 6 forms are only advanced. In terms of power, Yulo's 6 forms are only stronger than him. In an instant, Ilo's idea of winning in close combat was shattered from the very beginning. Is this the so-called monster genius? Ha 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 ha, Snow Leopard Admiral, are you surprised? Yulo smiled jokingly and looked at Ailo with very provocative eyes. No matter who you are fighting against, the opponent will inevitably be shocked and shocked. Over time, the opponent's emotional changes became Yulo's bad taste. Ailot was silent, his expression kept changing, and his thoughts were tangled up in his mind. With such a good opportunity, if he let Yulo go, he would feel completely unwilling to do so. After weighing the pros and cons, he released observation haki, sensed the situation in the surrounding area, and determined that Yulo was the only one. He secretly made up his mind to kill Yulo even if he was seriously injured and disabled. Yulo, on the other hand, counted the time and became a little impatient. Rox and the others are waiting for him, and they can't wait too long. In this short time, the intelligence agents lurking in the residential area and across the sea must have spread the news of Marineford's war to the New World. They and the others had to rush back as soon as possible to prevent anyone from harassing Beehive Island. Haha, old man Admiral, why are you whining? If you don't fight, I will leave. Yulo looked at Ailot, looking like he was dormant in thought, and sneered and teased. Although he is very powerful, Admiral can still stop him if he wants to retreat head-on. If it was true that Ailot said that he was here to intercept and kill him, he would be entangled even if he wanted to leave. It would be better to ask him seriously like this. Sure enough, a gloomy and hoarse voice sounded, and the fierce murderous intent suddenly spread out, and it was even colder than the cold air. Haha, want to leave? Yulo, you can't go anywhere, this is your burial place. Having made up his mind, Ailot slowly raised his lowered head, his expression became ferocious and terrifying, and his eyes shone with a cold light. The murderous intention was mixed with cold air, and Ailo's momentum was rising. The extremely cold snow could not stop escaping from his body. Are you tempted to kill? It's kind of interesting. Yulo, who was calm and composed, couldn't help but frown, the corners of his mouth curved, and he murmured to himself inexplicably. There was a gap between his location and Ailot. Even so, he could still feel the cold and pure killing intent. It seems that Ailot is indeed murderous, and the aura soaring in his body is getting bigger and bigger. This posture is going to be desperate. But Yulo is also a little confused. Doesn't Ailot know his record of defeating 5 elders? Coming in such a hurry to die, knowing that he was outmatched, he was worthy of being a Marine Admiral, it was really courageous. But what Yulo didn't know was that Ailot really didn't know. If you want to kill me, then let's try. If you can't kill me, you will die. Yulo relaxed his brows, moved his neck, and said with cold eyes. The other party wants to kill him no matter the cost, and Yulo is not polite. Besides, he probably won't be able to leave unless he kills him. At this moment, the sound of the system came in, making Yulo stunned for a moment. Ding. Trigger mission check-in. Kill Marine Admiral, Snow Leopard Ailot, achieve Admiral's first kill, and get a special reward. The task is successfully checked in and the rewards are automatically distributed. Yulo curled his lips secretly. Killing a Marine Admiral may take some effort, but it is exciting just thinking about it. The system prompts came in time, making Yulo even more motivated. The special rewards that appear for the first time, as well as the rewards for defeating the 5 elders, are enough to further his strength. Yulo couldn't help but look forward to it. The light in his eyes was extremely frightening, and his ferocious beast-like gaze locked on Ailot. How arrogant. Ah! Ailot was furious and roared in a low voice. His body elementalized and turned into flying snow, spreading in all directions. Call. 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 There were bursts of howling, the wind was freezing in the air, and the sky was covered with flying snow. Blizzards were raging everywhere as far as the eye could see. The entire space where the two parties were located seemed to have turned into a world of snow. The freezing cold air invaded everywhere and was filled with a cold white air. The freezing sounds of crackling came one after another, and the clouds not far above the head even condensed into ice cubes. In the world of ice and snow, Yulo's figure is proud and independent, and the strong cold air cannot threaten him. Change the natural environment and the fruits will awaken. Yulo raised his eyebrows and muttered to himself in surprise, with interest in his eyes. It's not because of Ailot, his fruit has awakened as early as Yulo expected. But when the fruit ability reaches the level of awakening, its power can be said to increase exponentially. Snow fruit is the inferior fruit of frozen fruit, but after awakening, its ability has the characteristics of freezing, while still retaining the tough characteristics of snow. A hurricane formed by countless cold air currents blew violently from all directions. Before it even got close, the biting cold air invaded Yulo's internal organs. The green fire inside his body burned, and the cold air couldn't help but run wild, but Yulo's clothes actually began to condense. Blizzard impact. There was a soft shout in the air, and snowflakes condensed into snowflakes in all directions around Yulo, wrapped in the cold air, and surged over violently like a roaring sea. Ha 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 ha, the power of awakening is indeed extraordinary. But in front of me, it's still a little bit worse. Yulo's laughter was wild. There was a trace of solemnity on his face, and the fighting spirit he had accumulated for a long time completely burst out. This large-scale ice and snowfield can barely be regarded as a small natural disaster. If it were replaced by Shiki or Newgate, it would be quite difficult to deal with it. However, Yulo's green fire has restrained it. Although it has not awakened yet, it can't stand the high temperature. Boom. The green fire in Yulo's body boiled, and his whole body was billowing with heat. Before the flame appeared, the heat wave swept over him first. No matter how cold it was instantly driven away by the heat wave, and a hot place appeared in the vast ice and snow. Great flame ring. The green lotus earth core fire cheered for joy, and rushed out in spurts, swirling around Yulo's body, and the green fire Uzumaki spread in all directions. All the white cold air and flying snow along the way have melted away and been replaced by heat. The realm of fire and heat is getting bigger and bigger. Boom. The blizzard like a rushing river hit the green fire with a bang. The sound of sizzling was endless, and the white mist steamed upward. The white mist formed a circle, like a wall of mist, dividing the flames from the cold snow. Wow. Wow. The 8 blizzard horses, under the blessing of the environment, seemed to be coming in an endless stream, one after another. Suddenly, Yulo's observation haki captured several sounds breaking through the air. Ilo's elemental physique flashed constantly in the sky above Yulo. In conjunction with the 8 blizzards below, he condescendingly slashed out 8 blizzard slashes again. Snort. Yulo's observation haki, sensing everything outside, let out a cold snort. Fire Emperor. The green fire Uzumaki spins happily, the fire intensity and temperature increase sharply, and Uzumaki becomes bigger again. The 8 blizzards burst apart without any resistance. The cold snow that came up became leaderless and automatically collapsed in place. Immediately afterwards, Yulo raised his right hand and raised his palm high above his head. The green fire Uzumaki's fire intensity is high, and the endless flames rise up, spinning upward at extremely high speeds. The 8 snowblades that attempted to attack were directly evaporated by the high temperature as the flames surged up. Ilo's figure flashed, turned into a wisp of wind and flying snow, and quickly retreated into the distance. From using his awakening ability to create a world of ice and snow, to snowflow slashing and piling, he didn't take any advantage in this round of attacks. Yulo broke his move and a counterattack was formed. Ilo must block this move perfectly. Otherwise, the icy and snowy environment that was favorable to him might be broken. This is a field that he created after spending some energy and activating his fruit abilities with all his strength. Ice and snow. What? Ilot accumulated energy and was about to attack again when observation haki sensed the past. Suddenly, the spirit trembled. In the white mist in the distance, a large number of green fires rose and gathered. The already hot temperature was rising at a crazy speed. Ilot stared intently, supplemented by seeing, hearing and color perception. The fire behind the white mist became bigger and bigger, and he couldn't help but beat his heart. The blazing green fire continued to gather in the palm of Yulo's hand, forming a ball of green fire. As the flames gathered crazily, the cyan fireball grew larger and larger until it completely covered Yulo. The high temperature was constantly compressing, and the cyan fireball underwent a qualitative change. A terrifying heat wave broke out, directly dispersing the white mist, and the hazy firelight suddenly became clear. A huge blue fireball appeared in this world of ice and snow, and appeared in Ilo's eyes. Yulo raised his right hand high and dragged it on the palm of his hand. His whole body was bathed in the firelight, like a fire god descending to earth and looking around. The huge green fireball was like a sun just looking at it from a distance. The boiling flames on the surface made people shudder. Yulo's tall figure looked extremely small under the blue sun, but exuded an invincible aura. Even in a world of ice and snow, my fire still shines brightly. The white mist completely dispersed, and Ilo's pupils reflected the cyan sun. Such a strong energy fluctuation. How is this possible? How is it possible? Ilot's heart trembled, his face showed a look of horror, and he muttered to himself in disbelief. As soon as his observation haki got close to the cyan sun, the terrifying energy fluctuation instantly shattered his perception. The energy contained in moves of this level is even stronger than his awakening ability. Moreover, such a high temperature did not affect the environment and formed a natural field. This shows that Yulo's devil fruit has not yet reached the level of awakening. It is also the fruit of Logia. Why is Yulo's fruit so much more powerful than his? Z. G. 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 At this time, a series of subtle sounds brought Ailuo back to reality. His mind was suddenly shaken, and he hurriedly checked the situation. His face changed drastically, and then changed. His expression was extremely ugly, as if he had eaten shang. Because his awakening realm is slowly melting, and the cold air and ice contained in it are also slowly passing away. In his own realm of awakening, facing the huge cyan sun, he felt invincible. If the awakening field is broken, the only advantage he has is gone. What can he use to compete with Yulo? A fruit, haki, and physical skills are not weaker than him, are even stronger, Yulo. Awakening realm. Nothing more than that. Your Majesty Admiral, prepare to receive this gift for you. The ice and snow realm melted, and the time came to take action. Yulo shouted coldly, and the cold and biting murderous aura seemed to become hot. Boom. The cyan sun moved. Yulo lowered his right hand. The giant great fireball boiled and burned, and hit Ailot. With this impact, the boiling green fire suddenly became restless, the hot air waves penetrated the blizzard, and the heat breath continued to sweep across all directions. The melting speed of the ice and snowfield suddenly accelerated sharply. Not good. Ailot cursed secretly, sensing the danger, and subconsciously wanted to avoid the attack, but found that there was nowhere to hide. In front of the cyan sun, he is also insignificant. As long as he is within range, this attack cannot be avoided. Damn it. Pirate Yulo, you got your break. 6 styles life burns. Ah. Ailot's face was ferocious, his eyes were bloodshot, and he yelled crazily. He must stabilize the ice and snow realm, this is his only advantage. Under normal conditions, if he were to carry out this move forcefully, the ice and snow field would break open, and he would also suffer serious injuries. Now that life burning is activated, the combat power can skyrocket in an instant. Although it requires a high price, compared with the former, the loss is minimal. Burning life's strength has greatly increased. It can not only stabilize the ice and snow field, but also catch the cyan sun, ensuring that it is least injured. Ailot's robes fluttered, his skin began to turn slightly red, white smoke emitted from his body, and his majestic vitality poured in and turned into his own strength. Call. Call. The intense cold air and flying snow swept across the realm again, and the melting ice and snow stopped one after another. However, the icy cold air only stabilizes the field. It is still a bit unrealistic to block the cyan sun. Aha! 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 The aura on Ailo's body was nearly twice as powerful, but he still did not dare to be strong. The blue fireball like the sun had no choice but to retreat straight back. Of course he knew it wouldn't help, it was just giving him time to fight back one after another. At the speed of the cyan sun, it was getting closer and closer to him. Although the fireball was huge in size, its speed was not slow at all. Snow wall. Snow wall. Snow wall. Ailo's physical strength was running, and while his body retreated violently, he used a large amount of cold snow power to form countless defensive barriers. One after another, countless snow walls, under the domineering impact of the blue sun, all of them, without exception, fell apart at the touch of a touch. However, Ailot was not willing to give up. When he came to the edge of the field, he braked and stopped. We can no longer retreat. If we retreat outside, the ice and snow realm will be destroyed. He braced his legs firmly, and Ailot's face turned red, and his muscles all over his body were tense. Display your armed colors. Ailot roared, the veins on his neck and forehead bulged, he pushed forward hard with both palms, and armament haki came to meet him. Bang! The invisible impact of the armed color outwards hit the surface of the cyan sun, but it only set off waves and did not shake the cyan sun at all. Seeing that haki's impact was ineffective, he directly condensed armament haki and turned it into an invisible wall in front of him. Boom! The cyan sun hit the invisible barrier, making a loud noise, and a large number of sparks flew everywhere. However, for the huge, cyan sun, these are just a drop in the bucket. Sure enough, after hitting the invisible wall, the cyan sun paused for a moment, and Ailo felt as if the mountain was overwhelming him. Immediately afterwards, the impact force did not diminish and it was crushed directly. Under the huge force like a mountain, Ilo's body was pressed, and the bones and joints of his limbs creaked. Well, Alot clenched his teeth, his muscles bulged, his veins popped out, and his roar trembled slightly. Even if the life burning is turned on, facing the huge impact of power, it is still almost impossible to resist. He thought a little too simply. The invisible armed barrier resisted the green fire without breaking, but the impact of such a huge fireball falling quickly might be something he couldn't bear. If you continue to persist, the bones and blood vessels in your body may burst. Immediately, Ilot let go and withdrew his armed defense. Boom. The cyan sun rolled over mercilessly, its blazing hot breath beating against Ilo's body. Aha! Igloo. Snow cave. Ilot burned his life crazily, some of his hair turned gray, and he mobilized all his strength to defend himself. In the huge ice and snow field, countless cold winds and ice and snow rushed towards him. The cold wind was howling and raging, blocking the blue sun, but the effect was minimal. A large amount of ice and snow came over, compressed and superimposed, and finally turned into two semicircular snow shields, protecting Ilot. The cyan sun hit, and the blazing flames engulfed Alot. Boom. The cyan sun, which contains high temperature, blooms brilliantly in the high sky, like a volcano erupting. The boundless sea of fire, wrapped in hot air waves, surged and surged, sweeping across the entire ice and snow field in an instant. The barely supported field of ice and snow shattered with a crackling sound, and the power of the green flames continued unabated, rushing towards the outer space with an unstoppable force. A radius of 1 kilometer was filled with green fire, and the scorching temperature baked it, turning it into an endless realm of fire. After Ilot defended himself, the cyan sun engulfed him. As soon as it came into contact with the flames, the igloo and snow cave began to melt rapidly. Qinglian's earth heartfire's restraint on snow is really beyond common sense. Even if his strength greatly increases and he mobilizes all his fruit abilities to compress the ice and snow to ultimate, he can only resist a few breaths, and directly break the defense after a few breaths. Ilot, who was in the sea of fire, activated the 6 forms of iron body and armament haki to defend himself from head to toe. Covered by armament haki, it effectively resisted the burning of Qinglian's core fire in the high temperature, but it was helpless. A large amount of water in his body evaporated in an instant, his physical strength dropped significantly, and even the effect of life burning was affected. As the cyan sun exploded, the raging flames wrapped in a violent heat wave completely engulfed Ilo's figure. The barely maintained armament coverage was directly interrupted by a violent impact. Without the protection of armament haki, his iron body, a 6-style defense technique, was very ineffective. Although it can withstand impact, it cannot withstand flames. Fortunately, the cyan sun exploded and turned into an endless sea of fire. He took staggering steps and moved outside despite the burning of the flames. But what he didn't expect was that this sea of fire seemed to be boundless. Even though he was almost exhausted, he never stopped, and he still couldn't see the end at a glance. Of course Ilot could not have imagined that it would be too difficult to escape from this sea of fire with a radius of a kilometer above and below based on his current movement speed. Yulo stood in the sea of fire, with flames beating around his body, but they couldn't hurt him at all. Haha, it's almost over. Yulo's observation haki sensed the sluggish Ilot on the other side of the sea of fire. The corners of his mouth kept curling up, as if there was something that made him happy. In the blazing sea of flames, Yulo's figure moved and slowly walked towards Alot. Clatter, clatter, clatter. Apart from the sound of burning flames, there was the sound of Yulo's footsteps, which could be heard very clearly in the sea of fire. As Yulo moved, the flames wherever he passed seemed to have met the master, and they swayed and bowed down. His. Ilot's body trembled, sensing Yulo's arrival. Abyss-like fear struck him, and his breathing became rapid. He stopped escaping and turned around with difficulty. Yulo, who was walking slowly, was like a Shinigami from hell, making the hairs on his body stand on end. The cold and pure murderous intent hit the depths of his mind, as if his soul was imprisoned. He wanted to rise up to resist, but found that his body and limbs no longer obeyed his orders. The highest combat power of naval headquarters, Admiral Alot, this is it. Yulo came to Ilo and looked at the embarrassed Marine Admiral with a look of disdain on his face. One of the 3 admirals in the naval headquarters, he is vulnerable in his hands. You can't blame Alot for being weak. It's because Yulo is too strong, and he just has the ability to restrain him, so he performed such a trick, the 3-move Admiral, 3-second real man. Ilo's clothes were ragged, and not a single piece of skin on his body was intact. Even a few body parts were directly elementalized by the sea of fire. Yulo stopped in front of him, and his sarcastic words were like a hammer striking deep in his heart. Ilo's body and mind trembled, and he climbed up from the bottom of the abyss, with a glimmer of light in his dim eyes. He, Pirate Yulo, you monster, everyone underestimates you. But so what? Pirates like you will be killed by the just marine. Aha! Ilot had a ferocious smile on his face and roared in a low voice, as if he was delivering his last words. However, suddenly, he roared violently, and the brilliance in his eyes turned into a strong murderous intention. With a cry, a cold wind blew by. Ilot suddenly burst into flames, and the elements turned into a blizzard, attacking Yulo in front of him. Even if he has no strength to fight anymore, he will still risk his life. Either Yulo will die or he will die. HMPH, naive. Yulo snorted coldly, a cold light burst out in his eyes, and his expression remained calm. Since he dares to stand in front of Ilot, he can deal with various means. He is still unbeatable in his prime state, and it is strange that he can accomplish anything in his severely injured and weak state. Yulo waved his hand gently, armament hockey was released, and the weak Ilot hit an iron plate. Puff! Ilot spurted out a mouthful of old blood, his elemental state was instantly lifted, and his whole body was ejected. Yulo's body was filled with murderous intent, his eyes narrowed slightly, taking advantage of this opportunity to kill him while he was sick. After killing Ilot, we still have to rush to meet up. 6 styles finger pistol fire dragon power. Yulo activated the 6-stage body technique. White energy lingered on the index finger of his right hand, and traces of green fire condensed on it. With a whoosh, the figure disappeared on the spot, and a flash of blue-white light approached Alot.